My guest today served as the staff writer and editor of The Weekender. For those of you who don't know, The Weekender back in the day was the Bible when it came to arts and entertainment in northeastern Pennsylvania. This one was an interesting one. Most of my previous Weekender guests have had very fond memories of The Weekender. That was not the case here, and he does not hold back. You'll hear about the beginning of the end of The Weekender, poor ownership, poor management, poor decisions. But it's not all bad, as it inspired him to launch his own award-winning online publication known as NEPA Scene, and NEPA Scene has surpassed The Weekender by leaps and bounds. This is The Weekender Files. Welcome to the show, Rich Howells. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Shirts for the Scene. Head over to thepopgoproject.com and you can purchase your favorite band tee. We are raising money for the local artist in northeastern Pennsylvania whose income was drastically affected by COVID-19 since the world shut down all the way back in March of last year. Hard to believe we've been going through this for almost a year now, but that's why this fundraiser is so important. Artists and musicians' income has been next to nothing, and by buying a t-shirt on the online store, your purchase will directly have an impact as the proceeds go to the band whose shirt you are buying. There are over 100 bands, artists, and venues to choose from, but the store will be closing at the end of March. So go to thepopgoproject.com and purchase your shirt today. That's thepopgoproject.com and click the link for Shirts for the Scene. And Shirts for the Scene is made possible by Axelrad Screen Printing in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Visit them online at axelradarmy.com. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by McDonald's. For decades, McDonald's customers have enjoyed fan favorites like the Big Mac, Quarter Pounder, Filet-O-Fish, and Egg McMuffin sandwiches, and now they are adding a new crave-worthy option to their roster of menu classics. Introducing McDonald's highly anticipated crispy chicken sandwich. They are in restaurants now in 3 tasty ways. First one we got up is the crispy chicken sandwich. For those of you who want to keep it simple, it's topped with their crinkle cut pickles and served on a new toasted buttered potato roll. The spicy crispy chicken sandwich, which I had the other day, for those of you who crave some heat, served with their spicy pepper sauce and crinkle cut pickles on a toasted potato roll. And finally, the deluxe crispy chicken sandwich for those of you looking for a little extra in the toppings department, served with shredded lettuce, Roma tomatoes, and mayonnaise. Get your butts to McDonald's today and take advantage of those 3 new menu options. And we are live. Rich Howells, how are you, buddy?
Good. How are you?
Living the dream, buddy. Sunday night, it's been a good weekend. I'm having a beer or 2. I hope you're doing the same.
I am, actually. What are you having?
I'm not sticking with it, but I have the first one I'm having right now is a Dogfish Head 90 Minute. Might be one of my favorite beers. The ABV is good, and the taste is incredible. It's not like that, high ABV taste.
Right.
It's got a nice full body taste to it. But yeah,
it's classic when it comes to craft beer. Absolutely classic. I am having a Stone Brewing Whoop Stout.
Okay, that's interesting.
This one is aged a couple years. I got it a few years ago, but it's aged in bourbon barrels, and it's quite good. This one, they change the artwork every year. It's like a collaboration beer with this actor who used to be on Star Trek, and the guy who runs Fark.com. If you're familiar with Fark, they do this collaboration stout every year, so it changes a little bit each time. But it's always quite good. And this one in particular has like superhero artwork on it. Sometimes it's like Star Wars or Star Trek art, things like that are in tribute without getting sued over it.
Well, that's right up your alley. And you say, new artwork. Dogfish Head is this is new artwork as well. It's done I don't want to call it a rebrand, but definitely new art from what I've seen on the 90-minute and the 60-minute.
I haven't seen that yet.
And I'm drinking out of my Brewdog live fast, drink slow, glass. Big fan of Brewdog. Shout out Brewdog. Actually, I have my backup here is a Brewdog Cannon Blast. Born in Scotland, brewed in Ohio. So,
well, you can't do a podcast without a beer. I mean,
well, no, and there's a couple things. This is a Weekender Files segment or episode rather, and you and I have a history of doing podcasts together.
Yeah,
with beer. We used to be sponsored by Beer Boys back in the day, and they always gave us these huge crowlers, right? Crowlers were called.
Yes,
and
I miss those.
we Rich and I interviewed a lot of people together, and now I will be the one interviewing Rich.
It's definitely going to be weird.
It's funny because you actually, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm a brilliant interviewer, but if it weren't for you inviting me to be a co-host on the NEPA Scene podcast back in March of 2017, I don't know if I'd be able to be doing this today. So thank you.
I appreciate that. I love what you're doing with the show. I think you're making your own name with it, and I've watched a bunch of episodes so far. I watched a few of the Weekender ones to kind of prepare for today, and it's interesting because it seems like most of the stories are very, very positive stories for the most part. Like I just watched the Matt Morgus one, and it was nothing but like it did great things for him, you know. But he also got out at the right time. So It kind of depends on when you were at the company and what was going on at the time and who owned it and stuff like that. You know, everybody has their stories of different eras. You know, I remember even when I started at the papers, a lot of the old journalists would talk about how, you know, they went through strikes and all this other stuff. So it certainly wasn't just one company or another. It seems like every few years these papers get turned into something else and somebody else takes over and thinks they know how to do it better. And it's a tough business.
Yeah, I do want to start by saying, or a little disclaimer, saying that anything we say here this evening is not meant to take a stab or dig at the current management or any of their staff members at the Times Leader. Those that are there now really had nothing to do with the Weekender when Rich and I were there. So I just wanted to clarify that because you know, people will take their take it for what it is. But
yeah, and it's not to say I don't have good things to say. I have plenty of good things to say, but it's about 50-50, maybe 60-40, and leaning towards the negative a little bit.
So like you kind of touched on, you kind of were at the Weekender. It's like kind of the tail end of it, but it wasn't all bad. So let's start with the good parts. Rich, you were the editor of, well, you were like a staff writer for the Weekender for like a minute.
It was a weird situation. So I guess maybe the story goes back a little bit further, right, in the sense that I started with the company under Go Lackawanna, which was a weekly newspaper in Scranton. It was the Times Leader's way of trying to break into the Scranton market because they're based in Wilkes-Barre. And the Scranton Times kind of has a stranglehold on newspapers in that area, and they did not like us existing. So it was short-lived. So I was there for, I wrote it down specifically. So 2010 to 2012. When I got there, it was the Times Leader Scranton edition, and it was just a straight, regular-looking newspaper. And maybe a couple months in, they were like, "Oh, we're rebooting this whole thing, and we're getting rid of your editor, but you can stay." I was like, "Oh wow," like I had just gotten this job, and it had literally saved me from retail hell. At this point, I was a manager at a Blockbuster, so you'd say that I didn't have long future in retail ahead of.
Well, you know what you should have done? You should have got on Reddit and got real clever with the stock market, and you could have. Whatever they did, I'm not informed enough to say what they did, but you could have increased the Blockbuster stock, and you would have set.
Yeah, like the whole GameStop thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It,
So
yeah,
you were saying that so you were with
so
Blockbuster.
I was with yeah I was at Blockbuster, and I was trying to get a writing job, and you had Christy Greer on. Christy hired me as a freelancer, so I was doing some freelance articles for the Abington Journal, which is one of the Times Leader's papers, and she was wonderful to work with. And I kind of saw it as just, okay, here's a way to get my foot in the door, maybe make a few bucks actually writing, because I had this English degree, and the payments were coming due on all of that debt that I'm still trying to dig myself out of. But I did the freelancing for about a year, and then that led into me getting an interview at the Times Leader Scranton edition. So they hired me, and it was basically a lot of fluff stories, a lot of city council, county commissioners, things like that. So straight news and, fluff pieces about like people in the community and stuff. And that wasn't really going to last long. So they, a couple months in, rebooted it as Go Lackawanna. They hired Chris Hughes as the editor. He's come up a bunch of times on these shows.
Yep.
And it just so happened that we went to high school together, and we didn't know each other that well, but we were both in drama clubs. We were both in some of the plays. And so we had kind of we knew each other well enough. But we really became really close friends by doing that, because we were both at the same age. We both wanted the same things. We both really wanted to take it seriously and make this really cool weekly paper that was different from what the Scranton Times was doing. We weren't trying to copy what they were doing, because we're only two guys and a couple of freelancers. We could never do what a whole building of people could do. And we were only a weekly, whereas they were a daily. So we kind of took this different approach and did a lot of digital forward stuff, more photos, video content, things like that, digital stuff, downloads and things. And this was really years before any newspaper in the area was even remotely interested in even trying that kind of stuff. And I think we made our mark. I won 3 Keystone Press Awards when I was there, which are statewide awards. So I knew we were doing good work. And a lot of the other people that I worked with there also won Keystone Press Awards. So we were definitely doing a lot. We had kind of a good following of people who picked it up every week. But the Times Leader really botched the distribution of it. The distribution was terrible. It was really hard to get. It seemed like the people who didn't want it ended up having it thrown on their doorstep, whether they liked it or not. And usually they hired this company that was throwing it in people's gutters and stuff. So they were seeing it as trash. They weren't even reading the paper. And then people who did want it couldn't find it. No matter where we told them to go look for it, it seemed like you could never get it. And so the distribution was terrible. And it seemed like the Times Leader at that point was too focused on trying to save themselves, because obviously there was, talks of a buyout and talks of changing companies and editors and all kinds of things. So I think they were too concerned with that to really worry about what we were doing in Scranton. So we got this great freedom to do really cool content that we really wanted to do. I think we did some great hard-hitting stories, but we also did like some, I handled most of the arts and entertainment stuff, which is kind of how I got into that. And I met some really cool bands and kind of discovered more about the local music scene that I didn't know really existed before that. And so I kind of started to make a name for myself doing that type of stuff and making the connections that I needed. And but I knew that it was going to be short-lived. So once I was about 2 years in, they had this came down one day that, we're changing the direction of the paper because we think we can sell the paper better in West Scranton, Taylor, and a couple other areas. And I'm like, okay, well, so if the biggest news of the world happens in South Scranton, we can't write about it. Yes, that's correct, is what they told me.
Makes
I
sense.
said, okay, that's the dumbest plan I've ever heard of in my life. And this was before the big company that we're going to talk about came in. So they were already making some grave mistakes. And a lot of people picked us up for our city council coverage or our county commissioner coverage because I felt we were a little less biased than some other writers were, and I think we gave a lot of a fair shot to everybody, and people recognized that and they respected that, and they made us cut all that out. They said, okay, well that's not relevant to this particular area. And when I knew I knew the final straw was there was some silly contest, like a music contest of some kind, and they wanted me to interview the second place winner, aka loser, of a contest because they lived in the coverage area that they suddenly made up. So I couldn't interview the winner, who maybe probably lived down the street but was across the invisible line that they created.
Sure.
And I'm like, so you want me to interview the second place winner of some contest that nobody's heard of? That's the big hitting story. Okay, this is getting bad. So at this point, I figured, okay, if they don't fire me, then the paper's just going to go under. So at that point, I had the idea for NEPA Scene. A lot of people don't know this, but I actually had bought the domain name and reserved the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram of @NEPA Scene back when I was still at Go Lackawanna. So that's how long ago that I was thinking about launching my own site. Because at that point, I figured my only other in that I think I could possibly get is the Weekender. But at that point, the Weekender wasn't hiring. So I figured I have no chance because anybody who has a job in journalism is going to hold on to it for dear life because you don't have a lot of options when you're in journalism. And if you're passionate about it, which I would say most of them are because it's a tough job and it pays like shit, you're going to stick to that job as much as you can, and you're not going to let it go. But as it just so happened, as this was all kind of tumbling downhill, the staff writer position opened up at the Weekender. So Nikki, who you had on, interviewed me for that job. And
I'm trying to think back because Nikki was promoted after Mike Lillo left.
Yes.
Which was 2011.
And I knew Lello from a couple of things. Like I would do a story at Go Lackawanna sometimes that would be relevant to the Weekender. So I would send him that story. So he got a free story essentially here and there from Go Lackawanna because obviously budgets are small. You can only do so much. So every once in a while, if we thought it was something the Weekender would like, we'd send them a story, and sometimes they'd run it. So I had a few stories in the Weekender at that point.
Right. So my question is, Nikki was promoted to the editor after Mike left, which was 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Did she take on the staff writer and editor position for a while? Because I feel like you didn't come on board until 2012.
Yes, that's right.
So I'm trying to think.
As far as I know, yeah, she was doing both double duty at the time. Because I don't remember there being a staff writer there when I interviewed.
Yeah, there wasn't. That's weird. How the hell did that play out? Oh.
So I think I think she was hiring me as a staff writer, but at the same time, unbeknownst to everybody, I guess she was looking at other jobs and looking in New York to move out of the area. And so by the time I interviewed, got the job, and sat in the seat, then she essentially put in her 2 weeks, like almost right after that. So I didn't really interact with her too much because I only did a couple of stories at that point. And with Go Lackawanna kind of being almost put to bed at that point, they had Chris Hughes come on as the interim editor of the Weekender. So it's basically like Go Lackawanna Part 2 for a couple of weeks. And essentially, I think, and you can ask him if you want, but I think he was told by Joe Buckowitz or whoever at the Times leader, like, shadow him, make sure that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. If he knows what he's doing, then you can offer, he can be the editor, because Chris didn't want to stay. It wasn't a goal of his to be the editor there. And they needed him back at the TL for stuff there because he had done many stuff with the Times leader over the years. So I think he, kind of guided me and said, here's how you you handle this kind of stuff and whatever. So I just fell into the job as editor. So I went from thinking I'm not going to have a job in a couple of weeks. I better start my own site and hope for the best to, oh, here's a full-time gig with, better pay than you've ever gotten for any writing you've ever done in your life. And you get to be the editor and you get to choose your own staff writer. So right after that, we interviewed and I hired Sarah Picorni, who I don't know if you're going to talk to her at some point, but I think
she's on the list. Yes. Sarah Picorni is now Sarah something other. She's married now, and
yes, I saw that she got married, which is great.
Congrats, Sarah.
Yes,
congrats. So here's something that's weird. So I was the GM when you were the staff writer, fast track to editor.
Yes.
You'd think that I would have a better remembrance of these moments because I was the GM.
Yeah.
But I really don't. Which is like, I'm trying to figure out why that is. It's weird
because everybody at that point was doing 2 or 3 people's jobs and getting paid for one, and then that increased.
Yeah,
over the next year
I mean, as the GM, I definitely left Nikki to. I knew she knew how to do her job, so I wasn't in any way trying to dictate or delegate to her what needed to do. So I, as a GM, I was like, that part of the arm is taken care of, whereas the sales part of it was what needed some more attention, and I was still carrying some accounts because we had a small sales team. I think at the time there was 2 guys, and I was essentially the third acting salesman while I was the general manager as well. So it was a very hectic time for sure. And it's like, I for me, and I know this, I don't want to get off of your story here, but like for me, all I ever wanted to do was be the GM.
Yeah.
I got to that point and I was like, this is not what I expected this to be. This is the opposite of what I always thought it would be. But we'll get into that. So,
it's funny because that kind of reflects exactly how I felt because I took over as editor, and then I hired Sarah because first I definitely want a female on the staff, but obviously I interviewed a few different people. It wasn't set in stone, but I wanted a female voice on the staff. And I wanted somebody who had a good sense of humor and a sense of fun and that kind of thing. And she fit all of that, in spades. And she was a great writer on top of it. And she already had the experience. She was doing some stuff for the Times Leader features at that point. And it seemed like she really kind of wanted to get out of that, more kind of stiff writing for the newspaper and do more fun, featurey kind of stuff that we were doing at the Weekender. So everything fell into place. And I was like, this is great. So she gets hired. And then within a couple of days, I get I don't know if it was a phone call or an email. I'm pretty sure it was an email from Joe Buckowitz saying, congrats on the new position. By the way, your budget is cut in half. Have fun. So right away, I was told that all the money that now and you guys have covered this in a couple other of these podcasts, how little money the Weekender had to work with. And so now I was told that literally half of the money that the other people got, I now have to work with half of that. So I emailed all of the freelancers and I said, well, here's the deal. I said, I can either cut half of you and say, thanks for your service, but I'm never going to email you again for a story, or everybody can get cut in half in terms of the pay. So everybody unanimously agreed to taking the half because they still wanted to contribute. And obviously most of them weren't doing it for the money. They were doing it because they wanted to interview somebody in particular, or they just liked to write, or whatever the case may be. So that was a really hard decision, especially because just a few years ago, I was in that same position. as a freelancer, trying to make it as a writer and trying to make it as a journalist, and it that was tough. So right away they had me making the tough choices. So
Right. And now you're the new guy telling these other people, these writers that, hey, your pay is getting cut.
yeah,
And they don't know anybody else other than you. So it's you
exactly.
being the bad guy.
Exactly. Yeah. They were essentially throwing me under the bus in that sense. And these people, I think, understood because I try to word it the best way that I possibly could, the most sensitive way that I could, and explained, my story too. Like I'm in the same boat, and I know that essentially over the next few months, I'm going to be taking over other people's jobs too that I don't want to do. So, right away, I liked working with you guys because we had a good team, and we had this meeting of the minds once a week, which I really enjoyed. Every Wednesday, once the paper came out, we'd all sit down, and you guys on the ad side and us on the editorial side were able to kind of talk and collaborate and figure out what we wanted to do for the week, and that was great. And we also had Amanda, who was our kind of main photographer, like house photographer, but also our designer, who designed the front covers and some of the stories inside, and she did obviously the ads and stuff too. And it was funny because I wanted to make sure I mentioned this story quick, but Amanda did not like me at first, and I don't know why. I don't know if we ever really established that, but she just, for some reason, just didn't. I don't know if I rubbed her the wrong way or said something or whatever, but uh, we didn't get along at first. We were just butting heads all the time in terms of like, I'd say, hey, can we do it this? No, that's impossible. We just can't do it that way. If I said, I really think this should be red. No, it's blue. It's got to be blue. And and then eventually, as we worked together more, we really got along, and then we became friends too. And that I think, and that's something that I think is going to come into play later as the story goes on. But I'm a big believer in, you don't have to like me, but we can all get along, and we can all work together. And if we have differences, that's totally fine. But I'm going to continue to work with you. I'm not going to try and undermine you. I'm not going to try and fight with you. I'm not going to try and get you fired. I'm not going to, people really become weasels in the workplace in a lot of ways. And thankfully, we didn't have that in our little staff. We didn't have that. But I saw it in other departments where somebody would try to undermine somebody else, talk down to them, make them feel bad, go to the boss and say, hey, so-and-so is doing this or that, or, whatever, try and push them out. And I'm a firm believer in, we all got the job for a reason. We're all here based on our merits and based on our passion for things. So I didn't feel that it was necessary to go that route, and it worked in our favor because everybody ended up getting along in the long run. And like a family, I think we had our we had our disagreements or our debates on what we should or shouldn't do, or what we should write about, or what should be on the cover, but never anything that I thought was mean or unfriendly.
No, I mean, and that's been a common theme too, is, no matter who was at the weekend at the time, we were all very passionate about that product, and we all kind of acted as a family and like brothers and sisters, and we fought that way too. I've
Yeah.
said that, I think, time and time again. And I want to go touch on the fact that you said that we'd have these weekly staff meetings, and for anyone listening or watching, like they might say, well, that who cares? That's not a big deal. But like in the newspaper world, that is a big deal because uh, more often than not, editorial would never speak to the sales department. And
Yes.
why I think that was important is because we had a staff meeting. We would sit down. It was editorial. It was staff. It was management. I mean, the salespeople are the people that are out on the streets. They're the ones talking to people, and they're the ones who, I wouldn't say know more of what's going on, because that's not the right way to put it. But they're out there, they're on the street, and they see a lot more as opposed to someone who's in the building most of the day. So that's
Right.
why that's important, I think.
Absolutely. And I understand that like some people feel like, oh, one is going to taint the other. That, if you're in advertising, you're going to say, hey, you should do a story on this because it's going to make us money and that kind of thing. And that's not what our meetings were about. And that's not how we work.
No, not at all.
You
That's
know,
what I thought was really special. I mean, that's why when I was in college, I wanted to be in marketing, and I wanted to have like these collaborative meetings, and start from one idea that kind of, if I have an idea, then you say, hey, yeah, that's a great idea. What if we add this to it? And then
yeah,
Joe Schmo says, those are great ideas. Let's add this to it. Or I know someone who can help us out with this. And just kind of, it goes from a silly idea to like a really great idea. And that's what I always liked about
Mhm.
um, what we did and how we did things at the Weekender.
Yeah, yeah. And we did some, we followed some goofy trends. We did like the hell was it? Something
Harlem
shuffle.
Shake.
Harlem Shake. That's
Harlem Shake.
yeah, like stupid stuff like that, but uh and that's not my kind of thing, but it was fun to do it with everybody. Like if everybody was in on it, I mean, we were probably the worst dodgeball team in the history of dodgeball.
That is
um
true, but we drank like champions.
yes, exactly. So we joined this league with a bunch of
Cheers.
other people in other businesses and stuff, and for a feature, but also for fun, for team bonding sort of thing. And we all sucked at it. I mean, me especially, I definitely was always last picked in
I was
gym.
gonna say, speak for yourself, Rich, because I was an all
You,
star.
actually, you have a great arm. I definitely remember seeing some people get smacked in the face and stuff by your balls. So congrats on your big balls.
That's great.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we found different ways to have fun and stuff, and we had to do the awards and stuff every year and everything, and we all drank together, we all had a good time. So, and we really bonded over that time, which then makes the next part that much harder.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because like my memory is beginning to, I don't want to say fade away, but I guess fade away, and just there's more important things that are going on currently in my life that are kind of replacing those memories. So that's one reason I'm doing these, because I want to have a documentation, and I kind of want to just remember, you know, those times of my life. And yeah, things went downhill pretty quick. I mean, I don't even want to say it started with me, but I mean, let's be honest. I think once I left, that was a detrimental point in the Weekenders history. And again, I mean, you guys did a great job at doing your best to kind of keep it going, but I mean, the tools that you had even before I left were all gone. I mean, it was just a weird time. So let's get into that. So 2013 is kind of when you were hired as the editor in 2012,
Yeah.
fall ish.
Yeah, it was probably about the fall.
I know we did the model year party, which is typically in October. I know Chris was kind of involved at that point. Um, but I think moving on past that, we were on our own. I remember
Mhm.
we kind of, we I remember myself saying, okay, 2013, it's going to be our year. Our staff is in place, and we know who the players are. We had, Kieran and Paul Shaw were the sales guys. Amanda Ditmar was the photographer, designer. Sarah was the staff writer. You were the editor. I was a GM slash sales guy. But we all knew, like, okay, this is it. This is the team we have in place. And then they took us out of the Weekender building, which was located on 90 East Market Street. We had a small little office. It was actually like in the production center of the newspapers. like a small floor. It was only 6 of us or 7, 8 of us.
Yeah.
But they decided that they needed to keep a better eye on us, I think.
Yes, and that was, to me, that was the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
I mean, even our we had a big wall that had the Weekender logo painted on it and stuff like that. So we had our own kind of space, our own creative area, kind of do what we wanted. So they put us in this little wing in the Times Leader building that was right off of the main newsroom. So we did have a little space, but it was obviously much, much, much smaller, and it was right on top of the newsroom. And they would constantly come in and interrupt us and tell us what to do, whatever. But we had that little nook there, and essentially that was their way to start piling new stuff on top of us. Like, okay, now since you're here, because you're not working, you don't have your own paper to deal with every week. You can add this to your pile and this to your pile. One of the weird things they had me do was this paper called Bazaar, which was like a shopper paper. And we put a bunch of crappy AP stories on it to make it look like a newspaper, but it's just a bunch of ads. And it's just a way, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, for them to say, well, hey, your ad's going to appear in 6 papers, not realizing that one of those 6 papers is this crappy little insert thing that everybody immediately throws away and nobody ever looks at.
Right.
So they had me editing that every week on top of all the other stuff. Then came they cut our layout person. So now me and Sarah were doing the layout every week.
And that was Mike G, right?
What's that? Yeah,
that was Mike G. Yeah. So
yeah, and Mike G was great. I didn't know him as well as everybody else did, but I mean, he had been there for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, he was a savior in a lot of ways over the years. Yeah, I actually forgot about. I didn't forget about the fact that he lost his job, but I forgot that like these little bits and pieces like of just them taking from us, and then but adding on to us in the wrong ways. So yeah, it's all coming back to me now.
Yeah, I had to, if you ever see me looking over here, I wrote myself a bunch of notes so I would remember all this stuff.
Absolutely.
The more that I thought about it, the more it was kind of coming back to me. Because obviously we've all moved on and we're all doing other things now, and I think in some ways better things. But
I wanted to talk about the good and the bad, because there was that, and like you said earlier, in the heyday of the Weekender, there's a lot of good, and there was not a lot of bad things to say.
Right. And it really depended on what kind of era you were. And it's not to say I got to do some incredible stories. I did write down just a few of the people that I got to
I wanted to ask you before we get into like the downfall. Tell me a little bit about like the good stuff, like your favorite cover stories, the great interviews that you got to do that you never thought you'd even it was never on your radar, just like the good stuff.
So I'll blow through a bunch of these real quick, and then you can, if you want to learn more about any of them. So I did Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains, Alice Cooper, John Densmore from The Doors, Sebastian Bach, McMars of Motley Crue, Art, the singer of Everclear, Zach Wilde, the Black Label Society, Scott Ian from Anthrax, Andrew W.K., Sylvain of New York Dolls, who just passed away recently, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Take Back Sunday, The Used, Aaron Lewis, In This Moment, Coheed and Cambria, Jane's Addiction, Kansas Fuel, KMFDM, Stone Sour, Sarah Bareilles, Megadeth, Chubby Checker, The Queers, Air Supply, Lamb of God, Death Clock, and you can see all genres. Steve Martin, Henry Winkler, Lou Ferrigno, Peter Mayhew, who was Chewbacca, the original Chewbacca, Louis Black, Jim Belushi, Daryl Hammond, Judith O'Dea from The Living Dead, Walking Dead cast members, Paul Sorvino, Joel Hodgson, and Mike Nelson of Mystery Science Theater. And in terms of local people, Title Fight, Tiger's Jaw, Menzingers, Motionless in White, all of these people when they were still kind of starting to rise up and get bigger and stuff. So, and that's just a small sampling, and that's not even to mention all the local bands. Because one of the main things I wanted to do when I came back was, not that I thought Nikki did a bad job or anything. Nikki's direction seemed to be more of, featurey type stories that fit what she liked. I was more of a music nerd, so I really want to see a lot of local bands on the covers because that's what I remember, especially during like Mike Lello's time and stuff. Was every week it was like a new local band on the cover, somebody interesting that I wanted to learn more about. So I really put a lot of local bands on the covers in my time there, and I'm very proud of that. But we also did those stories too, not just to kind of build up my resume, but just because I was a music nerd, I really wanted to talk to these people. And, how many opportunities do you get to talk to some of these people? Like Jerry Cantrell in particular, one of my favorite stories to tell is, this is when Alice in Chains was just starting to come back with a new singer. And I had never gotten this kind of email before, but I got an email in advance that was a warning from his management and saying that, just so you're aware, Jerry is very hard to deal with and, can sometimes make journalists cry or hang up the phone or whatever. So just be aware that, don't ask him this, don't talk to him about that, don't mention this. And I'm like, oh, I'm already like completely, like sweating bullets having to pick up the phone and talk to this guy. And now you're piling this on me. Like, oh my God, this is going to be a nightmare. This is going to be terrible. And then what am I going to do? And I really did my research, overly so, as I usually do for these types of things. And I get on the phone with him, and he's great. And he's so easy to talk to. And I could tell he's a little guarded at first, and he doesn't like to talk about what the lyrics mean to his songs and things like that and whatever. And by halfway through the conversation, he stops and he says, "You're getting me to talk about what my lyrics mean." He's like, "I don't ever do that." It's like, "I really like you," and just keeps going. And so we had this great conversation. And I got off the phone, and I think his manager was like, "Holy shit." Because like he wanted to keep talking to me. Like we only had, a couple of minutes scheduled, 10 or 15 minutes or whatever. And we talked for probably a half hour, maybe more. And he was wonderful. And it was a great interview, and it turned out to be a great piece. So, that came from those years of doing those Go Lackawanna stories where, we weren't under the management's thumb. There wasn't anybody saying, you can't write about this or you should write about that or whatever. They were just happy as long as we filled the paper every week. They didn't really pay attention to us there because we were on the island, as we would call it, because we were in Scranton and everybody else was based in Wilkes-Barre. So we were even further from everybody than the Weekender was, because the Weekender was only a few blocks down from where the Times Leader was. We were in another city. So we had kind of free reign to do a lot of stuff that maybe wasn't particularly like the best thing to do, but it was like the thing that we wanted to do, or the thing we wanted to take a chance on because we thought readers would be interested in it, or we wanted to do it to take that opportunity while we still had it. Because obviously these opportunities don't last long. So, yeah, I really loved doing those types of interviews and kind of giving these guys, because they hear the same questions over and over. Most of these phoners are, 10 or 15 minutes, and they're doing it while they're driving in the car, or they're setting up their gear, or they're in a hotel in some city or whatever. So they've heard the same questions a million times over. So I was always I tried to read everything that they did recently, every interview that they did up until, on that tour, whatever it was, so that, and because you can usually read an interview and you can tell what the questions are, even if they're not written out for you. And so I tried to bring up things that were different, things that I thought they hadn't talked about before, or they didn't talk about often. And that really worked really well. So I had a really good time doing those stories. Art from Everclear, we did a cover story with him, and I thought he was one of the best because he was so brutally honest. This was a guy who wasn't afraid to talk about addiction and his times, hey, I had this big hit, but I was still depressed and I was down and I, went through all this stuff. And most of these guys, they don't want to talk about that. They want to do everything's great. Here's our new single. Go check it out. The happy stuff. They don't want to talk about these things.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, I love Everclear. I think Art's an awesome guy. I never had the pleasure of talking to him, but yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I think, especially now these days, that people want to hear. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm sure it's why you do what you do, because like it's those, anyone can do a radio interview or a newspaper interview. It's the same, generic questions. How'd you start? New CD, blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
Right.
Who cares? Like I can find that on Google, it's how can we get more, how can we get deeper and into the lives of these people that, people kind of care about and kind of can relate to and maybe get something out of when you talk about, art with, addiction and things like that. Like that's what people like are relating to, unfortunately. And, or at least, hearing about and saying, okay, I can change my life too, So yeah, I mean, that's definitely the route to go.
Yeah, I had a great time doing those. Honestly, though, the thing that I really, I took the journalism thing as like how else I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to be a writer since high school. But like, how do you make money doing that? And so journalism is just the easiest way, but maybe not like exactly what I wanted to do. But over time, I really fell in love with it because I liked telling real stories as opposed to having to make up stories for fiction and stuff. I wanted to because truth is stranger than fiction, but it's also more interesting. It's more in depth and it's something that people can relate to. Because you're not making it up. You're not trying to live someone else's life. You're just telling the readers about an actual life lived and how they lived it. So I really enjoyed that, and I fell in love with telling the local stories because they were stories that hadn't been told a million times. As much as I enjoyed doing that entire list of like people and stuff, and some of them I got to meet in person, other ones, most of them were over the phone. But I really liked doing the local stories because you'd meet them in person, you'd sit down and tell their story, and it was probably the first and maybe only time that their story was ever going to get told in print. And if it was told in the future, it was probably going to be told about, from somebody who's maybe less passionate, who's just got to bang out 6 or 7 stories, a day, and they just got to get through it. And so they're asking those same generic questions. So even locally, you see that same kind of formatted story repeated over and over and over again. And I was sick of reading that personally. So I wanted to tell stories that I thought were more interesting in a more interesting way, because most of these people are extremely interesting and they have stories to tell, as by doing this show, and you want to get more in depth. And so, having the space to do it, I mean, at this time, the Weekender was anywhere from 56 pages to like 80 pages usually. So like, that's a lot of space to fill. I mean, you guys obviously had your space for your ads, but there were some weeks where it was like, shit, we need another story on top of everything else we just did. And I was banging out 4 or 5 stories maybe a week. Sarah was doing 5, 6 stories a week, plus the very meager freelance budget we had to have a couple extra stories in there and some like columnists and things. So, I mean, that's a lot of content every week. And you hope that people actually give it a shot.
Yeah, what was cool about you guys, you and Sarah especially, like you guys wanted to write. And so here's the thing so those who are just listening or watching and don't know, the Weekender as a weekly could go up or down in increments of, I believe, 8. So it could be 56, 64, 72, 80, 88, 96. I think 96 was like the kind of cap. There was one time in Weekender history that we actually did over 100 pages. We actually had to like, I forget what it was. We sold a bunch of shit and we had to go above 100. And I forget what it was. I wish I could remember. Rachel Pugh might remember because I think it was her initiative. But so like you can get to Tuesday, and you can kind and like we always kind of like, all right, based on the stories, based on the ads, I think we'll be at a, let's say it's a 80-page paper this week.
Yeah.
But Tuesday comes and like let's say the Woodlands decides, you know what, instead of a full page ad, I want a half page, or
Yeah.
I want to cut it completely, or whatever the case may be. Um, we already had plans for an 80-page paper, but ads kind of fell through, and we're like, oh shit, like, from a budgetary standpoint, you're saying, okay, well maybe we like, instead of printing that 80 page, let's put it down to 72, or can you, Rich and Sarah, keep it at 80 by filling it with a story or two.
Right.
Um, it was always interesting for sure.
Yeah, and obviously, every once in a while, we would run an AP story because we had to, because there were extra pages that we didn't count on or whatever, and time was just out. We just couldn't get any more work done. But I mean, we were like, I look back on, just going through my files that I had saved to an old drive just for this interview to look up like some of the people that I've interviewed. I was like, the the amount of work that we put out is unreal. Like we fill books. Like we were pumping out a full size book, like a novel, every couple of weeks. Was a novel. Like in terms of how much writing and how detailed it was too. You always hope that people actually read the stories, which in the days of the internet, you're lucky if they even read the headline. So like we were putting a lot of work into these interviews to make them detailed, make them interesting, and then to edit everything too. To proofread everything, make sure everything makes sense, make sure everything works for the if there's any curses, you got to censor the cursing or cut that stuff out or whatever. Which usually we censor them. We didn't. I tried not to. I figured like we're the alternative weekly. We're supposed to be a little more edgy. So usually I just put a star, like
Yeah.
F star CK.
Looking back, we should let it fly.
Yeah, yeah, we should have. We really should have. But I was always when things started to go bad, it went from like what's interesting about Joe Buckowitz was he was the editor at the Times Leader when I was there, and he left when Civitas Media came in, when the hedge fund people and the merger people and the lawyers and all that stuff get involved. The good journalists either get crushed or leave. And thankfully, Joe was able to leave on his own terms. But he was the kind of guy you could go to, ask for advice at any time, and he would give you the absolute best sage advice for any of your editorial needs. And he was always there. He was always there when you needed him. And if he had a disagreement with you, he'd be stern with you. He'd be frank, but he wouldn't be mean about it. He didn't talk down to people. He didn't make them feel bad. He was a great manager in that sense. So there was some big shoes to fill when he was leaving. And
Yeah, can you before you get to that, because I think just to kind of add to that, I remember I had an issue with something. I forget what it was. I really wish I could remember. I just remember being in Joe's office and going to him and saying like, we need help with this, or this isn't going the way we need it to be. I forget what it was exactly. That's going to bother me. But like, to go into what you said, like, yeah, he was very approachable, and he was always a good mentor, whether it was um, editorial stuff or just a human being. He was always that person. And even when I went over to Time Shamrock, who he eventually landed at, I always would see him. Not always. I shouldn't say always, but like I'd see him in passing, and it was always a pleasure to see him and just kind of talk to him as a human being, and he's a great guy, and what I'm trying to get at is he's a good guy.
What was interesting about him too, and I didn't find this out until a little later, was that he used to be a weekender guy. He used to be a features guy. He used to do, like I remember at some point hearing this, and maybe he can correct me if you ever talk to him. Red carpet interviews and things like that, like big deal stuff, like stuff that newspapers just absolutely do not get to do anymore at all. But he was doing some really, really cool stuff. So he had that background as well. So he completely understood where we were coming from and what we were doing. It wasn't one of those things where you were talking to the hard news guy who only understood, courtrooms and fires and police and that kind of stuff, like the hard news stories. He knew how to do the other kinds of stories too. And that was a cool part about Go Lackawanna, was being able to do those. Like I was thrown into the fire right away. So I did like the police stories, the crime stories, somebody's house burned down, like those type of tragic stuff. And then the same week I'd be, talking to some, celebrity or doing a local news band story or something like that. There was a wide variety of stuff. The Weekender was so much more focused. And I liked that because I think that's where I wanted to go. Like at that point, I had figured out like I really like arts and entertainment stuff, and I want to keep doing that. But like it just became this high pressure situation where every day is like, is my job going to be next? And that's the world that we still live in now, where every journalist is afraid of another takeover, another, we're clearing everybody out sort of thing. And nobody gets replaced. Everybody just has to take on everyone else's job. And from the outside perspective, people just look at it as your paper sucks. It's not what it used to be. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. Not realizing like the incredible pressure that these people are under and how it would be so much better for their physical and mental health to just, work in a factory or a McDonald's or something, like anything to get away from that kind of situation. The only people that are really doing it at this point are the people who are diehards. And, I was one of those people. And I felt like the more that I took on, that I was indispensable. That not that I didn't think I could get fired, but in the back of my mind, I was like, there's no way they could fire me because I do so much. I take on so many other people's jobs at this point. So when they moved us over to the Times Leader building, they started sending everything to the hub. They got rid of everybody that was doing layout here. And so the company that took over owned a lot of other newspapers across the country. So they were installing people from their perspective, people that they thought could do a better job than you were doing, I guess. So Joe B got replaced by this guy, George, and he came in not being from the area, not knowing anything about the area. And that was a hard pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of us, because we all looked at it as like, we know this area like the back of our hands because we've lived here our whole lives. We know what people want to read about. We know what people are interested in. And here comes some outsider telling us, well, I think you should do it this way. I think it should be done that way. So I wasn't sure how to feel about him at first, but he was a younger guy. And I thought, well, maybe that's a good thing. A younger guy comes in and he knows that we need to be moving more digital. One of the things I wanted to do, which I never really got to do, was more digital content. We did do some stuff. We had, some features that were video heavy and things like that. But we never got to do the social media stuff I wanted to do. I wanted to do a podcast, which eventually became the NEPA Scene podcast, because I felt like, podcasts were just kind of starting to take off at that point. And I feel like we should have been ahead of that game. We should have been doing this because nobody else in the area was doing it. And now everybody's doing it. Everybody has podcasts, no offense, of course, but everybody's got a podcast.
It's oversaturated. And, it's I don't deserve to be here, but here I am.
No, you totally do, because you have the media background. I feel like there's and it's not I'm not pointing at any fingers at any particular shows or anything, but I feel like there's a lot of podcasts where it's like, this is great if I know the people involved, but otherwise, like, you not having a media background, it isn't really helping your show. It's just kind of a bunch of rambling and stuff. Like, it needs to have some kind of focus. You need to be an interviewer and kind of guide the story and keep things going and that stuff like that. And some of them are really good at it, and other ones are not. But I really wanted to see more of that kind of stuff, and I just never got the opportunity. So this guy came in, and my first meeting with him when he came into my office was very friendly, and he seemed like he knew what he was doing, and he wanted it. I was talking to him about digital stuff, and he's like, yes, yes, yes. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be great. And right before he leaves, he says, so I have this idea. I want to combine the Times Leader features with the Weekender. What do you think about that? And at this point, it was just two guys having a conversation. And I wasn't, obviously I saw him as my, he was a boss. He was my boss, but he wasn't like, he was saying it in a very friendly way. So I was like, well, I personally don't think that's a great idea, because the Times Leader features has traditionally been like for old ladies who want cookie recipes, or, how to grow your garden, in the springtime and stuff like that. And, our readership just wouldn't read those stories. And there's always crossover for sure. I mean, we could share stories. We often one of the writers there was embedded in the theater scene. So whereas Sarah did a lot of the theater stories, every once in a while we'd use one of the Times Leader stories if we needed, some extra, an extra story or two or something like that. We would use one of their stories, and vice versa. Sometimes they would use our stories. So, there's definitely crossover in certain areas, but I'm tonally, it doesn't make sense, because we're trying to be hip and cool, and, for the kids going out to the bars and stuff. There's a reason they're not reading the Times Leader features.
Well, the Weekender was the alternative. I mean, it was the alternative weekly.
Yes, exactly. It's literally in the description.
Yeah. And real quick, for a timeline purpose, the point where Rich is at right now is I had already left. Rich touched on the fact that they kind of outsourced things, and I was constantly saying to my advertisers, hey, sorry, your ad was wrong. Like, you wanted a full color ad and it ran black and white. You did a half page. Next week I'll give you a full page, full color, no added cost to you. And it was every single week after week after week, it was saying sorry to 1, 2, 3, 4 people. And saying sorry once is fine. Saying sorry twice is okay, especially with the way that I had the relationships built. But when you're saying it week after week for 3, 4, 5 weeks, you get to the point where they're saying, John, what the fuck is going on over there? What are you doing?
Yeah, so and that's when it really started to be noticeable, because like Amanda used to do our covers, and then they took that away from her. And They said, you can't do the covers anymore. You can't do these nice, feature spreads and stuff. She would lay out the cover story in these nice big spreads with big photos and nice colors and designs and backgrounds and things. All that was gone overnight. When they sent everything to the hub, the hub were just, and there's no other way I can say it, fucking idiots. Fucking idiots. These were people who had no background in newspapers whatsoever, and they didn't care. They were probably getting paid minimum wage or barely above that to sit in a cubicle and bang out a certain number of papers. So they're doing papers across the country for hours and hours and hours. I'm sure it was grueling work, and it was work that nobody really wants to do, even if you love newspapers. But this was, all done through phone calls or a very archaic instant message system that was like, dial-up AOL type of instant message system. And so we'd send them the stories, and they were just like, the stories would get cut off. The cut lines were wrong. The photos were, somebody's head would be cut off the photo. And they just go, approved. And no, this is not approved. Please go back Anybody with eyes could see that this is wrong. So, you think it was bad with the ads, it was just as bad with the editorial.
And no,
So,
and I know that, and that's the one of the reasons I left. Well, there was many reasons. It was just like, and I felt as a manager, I felt like I was abandoning you guys to an extent. But like, in my mind, I was like, you know what? I am not going to let this company from out of town who doesn't give a fuck about anything
yeah,
other than the bottom line ruin my reputation and the relationships that I built over 9 years, because that's just not how I operate. And I said, you know what? And I have to be the guy to talk to my staff and say, hey, like, suck it up or do whatever. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you know what? If it's my company, where I could talk to you and say, hey, Rich, like, you know what? Like, you know who I am. You know where the bottom line goes to. Like, yeah, we can have a conversation. But like, these people didn't give a fuck. And I saw
right.
that and I felt that. And I just, I don't, I feel
And it,
like I kind of ran away. But in the same sense, I wouldn't be where I am today if I let them ruin what I built.
yeah, and that's the thing is it got to a point where I probably would have quit at some point anyway, because my name was on this paper. You turn to the first page and there's my picture and it says editor. And editor implies that the paper has been edited. So if people open up and the first couple of pages, there's words all over the place, there's headlines all over the place, there's things cut off, there's completely incorrect, spelling and stuff. Even though you've already sent them the text, it's literally copy paste. Here's the headline. Here's the text. Here's what I need. I can't describe it to you any better than I am now. And they'd still come out wrong. And even after I'd give the approval, now, mind you, I would be there till after midnight a lot of times. And the people at the printers hated my guts, because they're like, we want to get this thing out and get it in the trucks and get it to all the paper boxes and things like that. And I was there sometimes at some, now this is after I worked all, a full, 12, 14, 16 hours in a day, literally begging people, oh, please, my God, page 20, please don't let it go to print like this. It is embarrassing. It is humiliating that this is going to have my name on it. And even after a lot of these corrections were made, I look at it in print and there it was. They sent two versions before that. And that's the one that ended up in print. And so I'm dealing with the humiliation. I'm dealing with the pain. I'm dealing with people emailing me going, fucking assholes at the Weekender, you idiots. You can't spell, you can't whatever. And I have to go, yeah, I guess we are that stupid, because they're not going to hear those excuses. They don't care. Your readership is looking at the paper every week and assuming that it's made in the fastest and best way possible. This was a company coming in and saying, we can do this better, and then adding 10 steps to the process. Instead of having a guy literally right next to me in the next room or down the stairs putting the paper together, I'm calling North Carolina. I'm calling another state and begging some guy who doesn't know what the Weekender is, doesn't care, to fix this page or whatever. He's not getting paid enough to give a shit. So I kind of don't blame him. And he's just getting okay and moving on because he's got a deadline to meet too. He's got a boss to please and whatever. And whenever I brought those concerns to anybody, it was just like, yeah, we know we're dealing with the same thing. Okay, then why haven't we corrected this? And it became weeks, and then it became months of this over and over and over again. And it was just, I was just run ragged, And meanwhile, as I was saying about our friend George, so, that first meeting after I had said in the nicest way possible, I personally don't think that's the best idea. Thinking in the back of my mind, you're just going to do this anyway. You're the boss and you can do whatever you want. You're probably just going to do this. I'm just letting you know in advance. Here's just what I think. From that day forward, he decided, you're my enemy. I am going to make your life miserable. And he did absolutely everything that he could to make my life a living hell, on top of the hell that I was already living with this. Because I've had, I'm doing these stories, whatever else, and I'm not putting that burden on anybody else. I'm not making Sarah stay till 12 at night. I'm not, and she was already doing many extra hours and not getting paid for it, whatever. But I was only getting paid for 40 hours a week, but I was doing way, way more than that, trying to do all this damage control. And then to come in at 9 o'clock the next day after I've gotten basically no sleep or whatever, and have George go, you're a minute late. We're going to have to talk about this. The one day, it just happened to be a Wednesday. Right before I left for work, my dog got up the front door. And, my dogs are my kids. I'm not having children. My wife and I are not having children. Our dogs mean so much to us.
Sure.
So this was only maybe a few months after we had gotten our first dog. And so she was still kind of skittish and still kind of unpredictable and whatever. And she just happened to, my wife opened the door really quick to say something to me, and she just slipped out and ran out the door. So the day after, dealing with one of those types of nights, and trying to leave for work and get there, because I live in Scranton. The office is in Wilkes-Barre, so it takes 40 minutes or so to get there and park and everything. So I'm chasing this dog around, and so I'm chasing her all over the neighborhood. We live right on Main Avenue, so the dog's darting in and out of cars. And I'm like, my heart's in my throat, because I'm like, okay, she's just one tire away from getting her head crushed. Like, it was a nightmare. So for the next few hours, it was us chasing this dog, trying to get the dog back. So finally we did. And, it took a few hours, but I had called everybody. I told Sarah, like, hey, here's what's going on, like, whatever. And I came in to a lecture from George about being late. And it was like, you're just busting my balls at this point. You know the situation. You know what went on today. And you're busting my balls about this. But then he would also, like, he was so weird as a manager. Not unlike Joe, who was, always there. You can never find him. He was never around when I needed him. He was just constantly out of his office on lunch, and just hours and hours gone. Just, didn't care, left us all to twist in the wind. And any concern that I had, I felt like he was just rolling his eyes, like, yeah, whatever. At one point, he invited me to these meetings, which then became meetings upon meetings upon meetings. And that was another mismanagement by Civitas Media, which I don't know what the fuck is a Civitas anyway. I don't even know where that terrible name. But he would call these meetings, and it was just like everybody from every paper had to sit there and listen to everybody else talk about their papers and stuff. And I'm like, what are we accomplishing here? And and then on top of that, then I'd get an email, send me everything that you're working on this week. So then it became, okay, now on top of all the work that I have to do, and dealing with the hub, and dealing with everything else, now I also have to type up a report every week to tell you what kind of content is there for you to ignore. He never responded to any of these emails. So yeah. I don't even know, like, so it got to the point where I realized he was trying to find a way to fire me. He was trying to find a way to push me out. And
before we get to that,
hmm?
I got to take this beer's getting to me. I got to take a real quick pee break.
Hmm? That's a good idea.
10 seconds.
I should do that.
I'm going to pause and we'll come right back.
All right.
All right, cool. Sorry about that. That was the most relieving. Yes, I've taken a long time. Sorry. So you were saying George, and he was never around, blah, 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 and that you were now required to kind of tell him via email or whatever what you were doing every week.
Yeah, like everything at all times. And then it was like, then he was popping in my office all the time. And it always seemed to be a criticism. It always seemed to be, and he'd say it in the worst ways possible. It wasn't like Joe, where if he had something, to say, he'd say it in a constructive way or a firm way. And it didn't feel like, you're being mean or you're spanking me or whatever. It was, done in a magnanimous way. He, George was just not a good manager in any way, shape, or form. And I felt like he was hurting the main product as well. I felt like the Times Leader was suffering as a paper. I felt the other papers were suffering under his leadership. I just didn't feel like he was the best fit for that much responsibility. And then when you wanted him to take some responsibility, he wasn't there. So I kind of knew like this guy's gunning for me. What do I do? And I thought, the only thing I can do is work harder and show that there's nothing that there's no reason to fire me. You might not, you've decided because I slightly disagreed with you on something in the nicest way possible that I'm your enemy. I'm just going to be super nice to your face. I was always nice and complimentary and was never mean and was never, no, fuck you, buddy. Like none of that type of stuff. I was always the good soldier. And
I can vouch for that too. I mean, you were never one to kind of go against the grain. I'm sure that you were in a situation where you were kind of more jaded than the time that I knew you and the time I was around you.
right.
But again, I mean, you're not looking to cause waves. So
Yeah, because there was nothing I could do about the situation. It is what it is. And
but it sucks that you were kind of like baited almost because like
yes,
it was very
and I think
like
that's what it was.
very
Is
casual.
if you poke the bear long enough, eventually he's going to bite. And I felt like that's what he was trying to do, was to get me to fuck up in some big way that he could say, all right, this guy's out of here. But he couldn't do it. And he couldn't find anything because no matter how many more meetings or reports he wanted me to do, I kept doing it on top of everything else that I had to do and on top of the pressures of dealing with the hub and everything. And the way he got me was he restructured the department. So I went to Warp Tour, which was something I did every year. I always covered Warp Tour and did all the interviews in the hot sun and stuff like that. And that was always a good time. And I always had fun doing those types of things. And you were meeting people on the fly, and sometimes people you didn't even prepare to interview, but you have the opportunity and they're right there, so you just do it. And so I was preparing all this coverage. And I started, obviously I'm updating social media because, I was one of the only people in the company that seemed to understand that just posting articles to Facebook is not enough, that you have to actually post other kinds of content too.
You gotta be a social on social media.
Yeah.
Weird.
So the connection up at the pavilion is not that great. This is at Montage Mountain. And the connection, the internet connection is not great up there. And so I had trouble posting to the social media. I didn't realize till I was told in the middle of it to, whatever you're doing, stop it and come in. So now I had to cut my coverage in half. I had planned to do interviews and stuff all day. So at 2 or 3 o'clock or whatever, I had to leave. I think I had to be there by 3 o'clock and get back to the Times Leader. And I thought, all right, this might be it. And at that point, I realized none of my social media posts were going through because they had taken away all my permissions while I was gone. So like a coward, he waited until I was out of the office. He knew specifically that I was going to be out of the office on this day to do this coverage because I had to tell him everything that I was doing. If I was taking a shit, he had to know about it. So they knew I was going to be out of the office and without direct access to a computer. So that's when they deleted all my permissions from the Facebook and Instagram and everything else.
Really?
So on my way there, I was kind of preparing for the worst and was like, I think I know what's coming, but I just want to know why. I just want to know, like, what did I do to deserve this? It felt like an abusive relationship where it was like you keep getting smacked and smacked and smacked, and you go, well, it's my fault. I'm sorry, it's my fault. And that's kind of my mindset at that point. It was just like, what did I do? Like, I did everything for this company. 2 years ago, Lackawanna, 2 years the Weekender, a year as a freelancer. I busted my ass for this company. I did everything right. Like, why don't I deserve this? Why don't I deserve a job doing what I wanted to do? And this was at a point where George knew that I was going to get married, that I had a wedding planned in a few months. He knew that I obviously wasn't making the best money, and that there's not a lot of opportunities for journalists. And I came in, and he sat me down and put a piece of paper in front of me and said, "Yeah, I'm restructuring the department." So he's carried out his plan of, I'm going to combine the features and the Weekender, and you're not a part of that plan. And so because of one comment several months ago that wasn't an ultimatum, he didn't come in and say, if you don't do this, you're fired, or if you don't do this, we're going to move on without you. I didn't really have a choice in this. I would just gave my opinion in what I thought was just a regular conversation between two employees. But apparently that was the beginning of my end. So he said, I'm going forward with this anyway. And sadly, the first thing out of my mouth was not, what am I going to do? Was, oh, what's the future of the Weekender? What's going to happen to it? Because that's how much I cared about that paper. That's how much I gave a shit about that paper. I wanted to know what the future was. Like, what's going to happen? I thought, maybe, in a slight chance, maybe they're going to discontinue the Weekender. Maybe they're going to stop printing it. And that's why they're getting it. Like, I couldn't think of a better job that I could have done. So who could they replace me with that could be any better than what I was doing? And they said, oh yeah, we're going to hire somebody else, and here's your severance. Sign this paper, or you don't get anything.
So, real quick, I mean, this is strange because, again, this is a timeline where I was not involved at all.
Sure.
So, I'm kind of
you're
baffled.
finding out about this for the first time.
Yeah. Really. Again, because I moved on before this happened, and it's, for me, the Weekender will forever be that girlfriend who cheated on you that you fucking hate, but you also still love.
Yes.
And much like you just said, I always prayed for the day that it would just cease to exist. And I don't know if you know this or not, but it kind of has. It kind of stopped printing before the pandemic last year. It stopped printing. It was being updated online. And then pandemic kind of expedited the situation where it just, would no longer print.
Yeah.
And they've done a very poor job, if at all, about updating the website. So,
right.
RIP Weekender. But so it'd be one thing if you got pulled into this meeting, said, hey, Rich, you know what? We appreciate what you've done over the years. We just kind of feel like we need to go in a different direction. Like,
yeah.
But it kind of what, from what you're saying, kind of sounds like, like you're initially your job is just kind of like you're restructuring and like,
yeah,
your position is not needed. But in the same sentence, it's like, yeah, you're not the guy. We're going to hire somebody else.
Yeah, but it is. See, that's the thing is yeah, he presented it as we're restructuring. What they're really doing is they're just changing your job title.
Right.
So that was his weaseling way of getting out of, actually finding a reason to fire me and then firing me. Because I think he didn't. I think, and I really do feel it was a personal thing, that he didn't want me to have a severance, that he just wanted to fire me and say, you did something wrong and you don't deserve any other money. Get out of here. And he didn't want to do that. He couldn't do that. He couldn't figure out a way to do that. So this was his way of getting rid of me and begrudgingly having to give me something. So I had to sign the paper because obviously I don't know what I'm going to do for money. So I have to sign this paper, whether I like it or not. And I signed it for X amount of dollars. I'm not going to say what it was, but it wasn't great. It was a couple of months of pay, essentially. And that was it. I got half of that money. I never received the other half.
Really?
And when I called them months later, this was months after I was gone, I said, I stopped receiving, I received half of this money and I never received the other half. And they said, oh, we made a mistake in the number that we gave you. It should have been half that. I said, well, even if that's true, which I don't think it is, I signed a contract. I signed a paper that says you have to pay me X amount of dollars. Essentially, they said tough shit. And that was the end of that conversation. So I never got the other part of that severance that I earned by doing, all this blood, sweat, and tears over the years. So that was a real, on top of everything else, that was just the absolute fuck you, you prick. Hope that nothing but bad things happen in the future. It was not cordial at all.
Well, and I'm assuming that you didn't go after them.
And that was, what I did was I called a bunch of lawyers and said,
it costs you more to do it.
Yes. And that was what they said was buddy, we agree with you. You absolutely have the legal right, but this is a pittance and you're going to pay me more to go after these guys than it would be to just call it a day. So that's what I had to do. So I remember it distinctly. I went to my computer and I backed up everything that I had on a drive, all my writing that I had done that was saved to that computer. I might have missed a few things, but I hastily did it because I figured the next thing is they're going to have some security guy walk me out of here, to make this even more humiliating, whatever. The worst part is through all these ridiculous meetings that he put me through over the years, I felt like at least does one person at the Times Leader have the courage to stand up to this guy? Does one person have the courage to say, I don't think you're doing this right, or maybe you did this guy dirty? Nobody stood up for me. Nobody cared. Nobody said a word. They knew what was happening, and they all just put their heads down at the desk and ignored me and pretend I didn't exist as I walked out the door with my tail between my legs.
Who was still there? Who was still there that would have known the work that you put in over the years?
I mean, practically everybody in the newsroom. I mean, I had obviously gotten to know these people over the years because between sharing stories through Go Lackawanna, which we often did because the Times Leader usually didn't send reporters down to Scranton. They just had us handle all of the Scranton area, Lackawanna County area. So we were constantly in contact with those people up there. And then, through the Weekender, same sort of thing. As the departments got smaller and smaller, they made us share more and more resources. So, and Sarah had a great relationship with the TL people because she was part of that newsroom for a long time. So, through that type of stuff, I think we had at least gotten to know each other a little bit. Plus all these ridiculous meetings that they had me sit in that were useless to me because it was all news related stuff. And then it was like, oh yeah, and by the way, does the Weekender guy have anything to say? And it's like, we're writing about Everclear, and they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. And that was the end of that. I don't know what the purpose of those are to this day.
So there's someone who would have said well, what's going on here?
I felt like there should have been somebody to at least say something, or at least be like, is this really the direction you're going to go? I mean, I was obviously there till all hours. The few people that, the real hard workers at the TL, the ones who had been there 12, 14 hours or whatever, and were still putting the paper together, they were having the same conversations with the hub I was. I got to know them through that too, because we were all having those same conversations. We're right next to each other. So there was definitely a few people, and I'm not going to call people out and say this guy should have said this or this guy should have said that.
But do do you also think that maybe that they kind of had the same fear that
I
said, hey, you know
Yeah, and I
what?
think that was part of it too, for sure. I think everybody was fearful for their jobs. They didn't want to stick it. But I guess you just feel like you build, as you talked about, a family. You build a family,
No, no,
and
and
even if
I
you,
100% get that.
you just feel like it's like somebody's got to say something, and nobody cared. You
I,
know,
and
so it was just a big kick in the ass.
I get that. And I can appreciate where you're coming from, but I also can kind of appreciate the fear that some people feel like,
Yeah,
I can't imagine, and that's why I got out when I did. I can't imagine, you know, if I wasn't able to leave on my own terms, I'd probably have the same discussion you're having with me right now.
right.
I'm still kind of bitter, and I left on my own terms. Again, I feel like it's the girlfriend who cheated on you that you still hate but you love. Um, but you go back to like these people who are in fear of, oh, geez, if this guy's getting walked out, like if I say the wrong thing, am I going to lose my job? And they got families and they got these other things. And it's like, they're probably in their heads. They're probably thinking like, hey, Rich, like I wish I could speak up for you because you're a great guy, but in the same sense, like I
Yeah,
can't risk losing my financial,
right.
um, you know, like I can't risk that. And
Sure.
so to go on what you're saying, like I can appreciate you saying, "Hey, I wish someone would have stuck up for me or put their neck on the line for me because of what I did." You probably have to understand that, they probably couldn't because they're seeing a great employee getting walked out the door, and it's like
Sure.
I can't talk about it because I'll get walked out the door and I can't afford it.
Yeah, but it's to I really wondered, like, at that point, um, do I have a future in journalism? Like, am I going to go back to retail? And I honestly had a lot of bad thoughts because uh, retail to me, and that's why to this day I respect everybody who's a waiter or waitress or anybody from a janitor to, all the way up the line. I respect people who do that type of work because people look down on you. And I can't tell you how many times at Blockbuster that I got screamed at over late fees that were that person's fault. That I was like, hey, I'm just doing my job. I'm the middleman, whatever. And, uh, but it was a constant people screaming in your face. So now I've had 4 years of real experience doing a real job, actually making money, doing what I love, what I'm passionate about, what I graduated college for, what I really wanted to do. To the thought of going back to that and then getting screamed at a grocery store or McDonald's or whatever was just like I don't know I don't know how I could do that. I don't know how I can go back to that because I feel like I was finally making it. And this is not to get too personal, but I guess that's what you want to do with these interviews. You want to get a little more in depth.
Sure.
My family always kind of pressured me to be a teacher because they said, well, if you're going to have a degree in English and your concentration in writing, you should be teaching people. And I have no passion for that. I don't want to teach people. I had plenty of interns, and I was happy to show them the ropes and that type of stuff. That I enjoyed very much. But I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to do the whole 9 to 5 as a teacher in front of a classroom, kids who don't care, and trying to get them to love Shakespeare and whatever.
Yeah, but Rich, you would have got summers off. You got a pension.
Yeah, they say that the
Rich,
summers.
Rich, how dare you? How dare you?
I have teachers in my own family, so I know that's not true. But there was just always this pressure to do that. But I had no passion for that. I didn't want to do that. So it was like finally my way of saying, hey, look, I finally did it. I made it as a journalist. I did what I said I was going to do all these years. It took me a long time to get there. And the week that I started at Go Lackawanna was probably within a month or two of when I was going to default on my one of my student loans because I just wasn't making enough money. No matter how many extra hours that I put in, I was never going to make that money back. Even if I took a second job at minimum wage, I never would have been able to make those outrageous payments on my school loans. And here I was paying the bills. I was moving forward with my life. I was going to get married, had this house, making mortgage payments and stuff like that. Finally, I was on my way, and to have that all ripped out from me overnight, like on top of the career part, that stuff aside, just the money side of it was just a nightmare. So, and have to make that phone call, on my way home after I got laid off, to make that phone call to my wife was one of the toughest things I ever had to do. Tell her this is the situation. And then when I got home, I said, remember that NEPA scene thing that I kept talking about? I still have that domain name. I still have the social media for it. That's what I want to do. I want to take the next couple of months, use my severance as my way to pay the bills for the next couple of months. And I'm gonna give this thing a shot because I feel like I did everything right. I feel like I poured my heart and soul into this project, into the Weekender. I thought I put out some great stuff and I made some great connections. Local artists understood like, oh, cool. We got a guy who's in there who's doing the right thing. We got a guy who loves what we do. We got a guy who's making sure that we get the coverage we deserve, and I wanted to continue that. So I said, well, over the next couple of months, I'm going to work on NEPA scene. I'm going to update the website, but I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm going to, maybe tell a few close friends, but I'm not going to make it public until September. And at that point, that's when the payments were essentially going to run out. I said, I'm going to launch in September. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of content already on the website, already available. So they're not just going to the page and there's one or two articles. There's dozens and dozens of articles. And I'm going to launch then and see if this clicks with anybody. See if anybody cares. See if maybe all those connections that I made over the last 4 years made a difference. If those people support me. So I launched it.
Well, Rich, before you get to that,
yeah,
before you get to all that,
sure.
I can't help because as much as I don't know about what happened, behind the scenes after I was already gone, I do know from people inside that like I can't help but want to talk about the fact that they were restructuring the Weekender and the position.
Yeah.
And that meant that you were no longer going to be the editor. But
yeah,
when I hear restructuring, I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? They're restructuring. They're gonna like, if Joby was still there, whatever, whoever it might have been, maybe it was what's his face, George. He was going to oversee the editorial responsibilities of the Weekender.
Yeah,
but that's not the case. They hired somebody, and I am bringing this up because I think it's important. And I'm not trying to pull anybody into the mud. I'm not trying to do anything like that. But I think it's important because the person they brought somebody in who I don't think was qualified for the position, and I say that because I'm confident that they weren't, because at some point in the Weekender history, there was an article printed that was greenlit by this person. And
oh yeah,
it was not a good situation. So I don't want to, I'm not trying to like dig up dirt on people or, bring people into the fold that don't deserve it, but I feel like it's important for the conversation.
So yeah, obviously my origin story with NEPA scene. I guess I'm a comic book guy, so that's why I think of it that way. They ties into the bad direction of the Weekender. So within the first month of NEPAC launching, we had over 1,000 likes on Facebook. And that was not an easy feat. And then it was 2,000, then it was 3,000. Like we immediately I had this huge response to what I was doing. And it was just doing the work that I had already done for the Weekender, but doing it a little more uncensored, a little more free flowing, but digital forward. The idea was really like all the things that I was pitching to the Weekender that they didn't want to do because they didn't want to invest the money. They didn't think it was worth it. They didn't think a social media presence was important. It was like Blockbuster all over again. Oh, Netflix? Huh, don't worry about them. We're fine. You know,
it'll never work.
Yeah, these kids that are in, they'll forget all about this Instagram and Facebook and all that shit. Like that's not a thing.
Movies on your phone? Get out of here.
Yeah, right? Like they just it was talking to fucking dinosaurs. So I did all those things, and I thought, okay, this will prove to me personally if I'm an idiot or not. Because maybe they're right. Maybe I'm a terrible editor. Maybe I'm a terrible writer. Maybe that they didn't need me anymore because they wanted to go in some brilliant direction that was going to shoot them into the stratosphere, that was going to take the Weekender into the next century, and I was just going to get left behind because I'm an idiot. Or it's going to prove that everything that I was saying they should have been doing years ago is right, and the market wants this, and the audience in Northeast PA wants this, and we're going to succeed. And right away, we not only had thousands of likes, but NEPA BlogCon, we won the Best Blog Award at NEPA BlogCon within a couple of months of us existing. And this is going, a year-round thing where there's plenty of other blogs that are doing this stuff. But what's weird about my background is, not to get too far off topic, before I ever started in journalism, the first thing that I ever did writing-wise was blogging. I got on the blogging train before they called it blogging. It was not called that at any point. The word blog didn't exist yet. This is the AOL dial-up days. Me and my cousin loved like stand-up comedians, and we loved like ranty kind of stuff. So we would post these like rants, and we made our own site called That Thin Line. And this is a thing that very few people know about me. So you'll learn this along with a lot of other people. We did That Thin Line where it was kind of what people would consider offensive content, where we were writing very strong opinions. It was political, it was about politics, religion, all the things that they tell you not to talk about. We would cross that thin line between what you should and shouldn't say. And that was how I got my start in blogging. I was like maybe 15 or 16 years old. I'm sure none of that stuff, if it existed on the web, it's long gone now. But if it still existed, I'm sure none of it holds up. And it's probably a bunch of angsty bullshit. But it was my way of like expressing myself at that time, at that point. And then we refined that. By the time we got to college, we turned that into Muck Makers, which was not the muck rakers, but the muck makers. Here are the people that are making the muck in the world. Here are the bad people that we need to call out, and here's what they're doing wrong. And so it was this very ahead of its time, vitriolic political blogging, the kind of stuff that's very common you see today. We were doing that years and years ago. And that's kind of how I got my start in writing. So I had this background of, here's what blogs are doing. And then even when I got into journalism, I still followed a lot of the blogs that I followed at that time. I was a very web savvy person. I spent a lot of time on the internet. I'm a nerd with a very small group of friends. So that was my thing. So when NEPAC launched, I combined what I knew about blogging, what I knew about digital content with what I learned with journalism. Because journalists, newspaper people look down on the bloggers and go like, oh, they're a bunch of kids, a bunch of idiots. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have the background that we do. At the same time, those people look down on the journalists and go, they're a bunch of sellouts. They're a bunch of, corporate people, whatever. So I kind of had the mindset of, why can't we marry the two? Why can't we have the journalistic ethics and the way things are supposed to be written, but done in a way that's accessible to a general audience, that's accessible to a digital audience, that this is the way people are reading things now. You talked a lot about how the Weekender is kind of a Bible at the time of how you found stuff. And by the time you left, that was not the case anymore. People weren't turning to that anymore. Even when I was there, one of the first things, and I don't know if you remember this, but I remember, I'm almost positive it was you who'd said, like, warned me when I came in, essentially, that it ain't what it used to be, and I don't know if those were your exact words, but that it's not what it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you would warn me at that point coming into it.
It's I don't know if I would have said that as the GM to you. And if I did, I'm sure I would have presented it in a way that was saying, "Hey, this is not the way it used to be."
Yeah.
And kind of like we need to be different. We need to try to adapt and kind of think differently than what we used to, 15 years ago, because
Yeah.
it's not what it used to be.
No.
From a company standpoint and from a consumer standpoint, it just wasn't the same thing. I know for a fact I would not have said it in a negative way, because I never would have wanted you to come in saying,
Yeah, no, I don't think you were trying to discourage me. I think you were
Yeah.
just trying to kind of give me an idea of, like, here's what you're in for. Like, don't expect like the way it was.
Yeah, and I'm very transparent I'm very transparent as a person too. Like, I don't want people to be misled.
Right.
Because I would not want that done to me. I would not want that done. So I think by saying that it was twofold. It was, hey, know what you're getting into, and B,
Yeah.
You got to think differently than what we're accustomed to. So,
right, and yeah, and I didn't, I thought you were great to work with. On a side note, like, I know I did a lot of complaining today about.
It's not.
Some people.
I don't think it's a complaint. It's reality. And
yeah, and I want people to understand that. I want people to understand, like, that's how this works. It's not, much like I was just listening right before we started. I had just finished the Matt Morgus episode, and had said how he was warned by a radio guy, don't get into radio. And this is a guy who's passionate, who loves radio, but he's telling you, don't get into this business because of the situation that it's in now. It's not what it used to be. It's not a great situation. We're not getting paid a lot. It's long hours, and you don't get that pat on the back. Like, you can barely survive in this thing. If I had to do it differently, maybe I would have gone for something else. And I kind of have that same message to a lot of the people who want to get into journalism. It's like, I don't know if I can recommend that, but I maybe can recommend trying to do it yourself. I think that that's the future of arts and entertainment in Northeast PA and beyond. I think arts and entertainment coverage, much like in our schools, how the arts are the first to go. They're never going to cut the football team because that makes money. But they're going to cut the theater program. They're going to cut the music program. All that stuff goes away unless parents are paying out of their pocket for it, or they're doing these crazy fundraisers to keep it going. Much in that same way, newspapers have been cutting back and cutting back and cutting back. And we're talking about how many years ago? We're 6, 7, 8 years ago now.
10, 11, 12.
So since then, we thought we felt the pressure. Now those newsrooms have shrunk even more. So I've noticed the arts and entertainment going away, because obviously the Weekender is gone, the Electric City is gone. That was the Scranton Times' version of the Weekender. They're kind of their answer to the Weekender. That's gone too.
Yeah, which never really. Let's be honest, that never really
No, it never took
Never
off.
worked out.
No, it never took off the same way. I don't think it'll ever be as fondly remembered. And that's no offense to I know some of the people that worked there, and they worked very hard, and they did some great stories. But I feel like it never had the impact that they
Well,
were
no,
hoping.
and it's one of those instances where like, it's like, hey, like, oh, we can't let them just do that. Like, let's just try and throw rocks at them. Like,
Yeah,
well, hey,
yeah,
do you have rocks to throw? Well, no, we don't have. let's, let's not get out of control. Like, I don't know, build some sticks and throw them at like. But that's
that's
how
good.
media works, in especially in this market, and we'll get into that too. But
Yes,
I don't know if you're avoiding the subject on purpose. And if you are, just say, hey, I don't want to talk about it. That's fine. But
I
like, again,
you can ask me anything. I will tell you that.
but again, I feel like we talked about the restructure of the
Yeah,
Weekender, and I feel and it was not exactly that. It was, hey, we just want to get rid of you to bring in somebody else.
yes.
So let's
So
talk about again. So me again. I was at this point I was gone,
yeah,
but I heard things from sources because I'm in media, and I definitely want to touch on that.
okay. So um, I'm going. I'm at least trying to go in kind of mental order. When I launched at APAC, I really honestly was not paying attention to the Weekender because I saw her as the bad ex girlfriend. At that point, she was the ex girlfriend that broke my heart. And I've had some bad breakups in my life. And this maybe was the worst. I think it maybe was even worse than the actual, like, I think this person is the love of my life and now they're leaving me for somebody else type of thing. Like, it was so heartbreaking to me that I felt like if I just ignore them, not that they'll go away, but that I got to do my own thing. And I felt like too much media, as you mentioned, is very tit for tat. Oh, they're doing that, we got to do that too. You're doing that, we got to do that story. Oh, they're launching a paper, we have to launch a paper just like that paper. And I feel like that's the wrong direction. That's the wrong thing to do,
Yeah,
because you're always going to be seen as copying the other guy. But if you don't, if you put your blinders on, you're doing what you want to do, what you're passionate about, what you love. It doesn't matter what the other guy's doing. People are going to see that and they're going to go, oh, wow, this is genuine. This is real, as opposed to this corporate bullshit that they're pumping out over here. This guy actually genuinely gives a shit and wants to put out real content that he thinks people really should care about. And I care about it too because he cares about it. And that's what I wanted to do. So I was doing stuff like, we launched an open mic for local artists. That was something the Weekender never would have fucking considered doing. At least the Weekender that I knew would have never considered that. Dealing with your everyday public, anybody could show up at your open mic, and you got to promote them. You got to, tell them they're doing a good job, whatever. I found like there was some amazing talent. And one of the things that I discovered that I'm kicking myself for was there was great stand-up comedians in the area. And I didn't know about it until we started the open mic at the Woodlands, thanks to my friend John Daw, who was working at the Woodlands at the time, was like, hey, I see you're launching this thing. I have this idea. I want to do this open mic to get people here on Tuesdays, because like Tuesdays are dead at the Woodlands. Why don't you come in and slap your name on it, call it the NEPAC open mic, give them some coverage, take some pictures, whatever, and maybe we could team up in that. And that's how that whole thing launched. And that became one of our biggest features. Now, today, it's NEPAC Rising Talent. We do it at the V Spot when COVID's not a thing anymore, or at least not what it is now. We'll get back to it. But it just became a huge hit for us because it was a way to connect to the artist directly. It was a way to meet people and for them to get invested in the site, and we were invested in them, and it just became its whole thing. Not to get off topic. At the time, I wasn't paying attention to what the Weekender was doing. But, you go to the Woodlands, there's a Weekender sitting there. Eventually, yeah, I picked up one. and flipped through it. What the fuck is this? What are they doing? What is this? At that point, I realized that they were. George hired this woman, Sarah, who was not from the area, much like himself, who came in and had no experience, didn't know what to do with it. So she promoted a columnist who I guess we'll Justin. Justin wrote a frat boy column. It's the best way I could say it. It's like the column of like, hey, I went out and partied, and here's my stupid drunk story. That type of thing.
Let's just call it what it is. It was Justin Adam Brown, and it was a column called "Sorry, Mom and Dad," which I think it had a life. It didn't start off as a douchey column, but unfortunately, it kind of ended that way. So let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, and I'll be fair. I'll be fair to Justin. When I was there, I mean, it was there before I started. It was something that started with Mike Lello, I believe, and it continued through Nikki. And when I got there, he was still contributing the column and stuff, and obviously agreed to do it on the lower amount that the freelancers were all cut down to. And he turned it in, and it wasn't necessarily for me, but I always felt like our content needed to be diverse, that it needed to have different audiences. Different people were picking up the paper for different reasons. Maybe they didn't care about me interviewing some, metal band or some local band or whatever, but maybe they wanted to read I had too many story, so it had its purpose. And to me, it wasn't offensive. There was one time that I got a column that I thought was a little too offensive, and I cut out the parts that I thought was offensive. And I said, here's what he seemed okay with it. I published it, the edited version of that. But there were certain times where he was making certain jokes where I was like, I'm not comfortable putting out this terribly sexist or terribly, offensive thing to be offensive. It was one of those kind of like, some jokes were in there to like, I just want to be offensive. Like, what can I get away with publishing?
Right.
And under my watch, that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to do that. And there was one story one time where he made some references to being like mentally handicapped or something like that, which is something like my brother's autistic. So I'm like, I don't want to go there. But the point of the story was like, he was the idiot, not this person. So it was like, okay, it was a lesson learned. I'm stupid, they're smart kind of thing. So, okay, that I can get behind. That I don't mind publishing. And I do remember the one time in the 2 years that I was there that I got an email about that from some random person. And I said, well, yeah, okay, I see your point, but here's why I decided to go with it. And they never responded. That was the end of that. So it wasn't a huge thing. And maybe in retrospect, I should have said, fucking fire this guy. Like, get this guy out of here. Who gives a shit about this column? Maybe that's me. But I always felt like, it's a legacy thing. It's been here through 2 editors. It's a thing that maybe has its own audience. It's hard to tell because our website was total shit. The Weekenders website was garbage. And that was another thing. I constantly fought with the people who were in charge of that to get the site fixed, and it never got fixed. Archives would disappear at all times. So there were things that we should have been getting web traffic from that we never did because they wouldn't do it. I mean, to this day, and this bothers the fuck out of me. If you go to the timesleader.com, they publish the photos that are made for print. Now, when you for those who don't know, when you go to print, you take a photo and you kind of wash out you bring out the brighter colors, and you wash out some of the other colors. So then when it actually prints on newsprint, it looks correct. Like it looks like the right colors. But if you were to look at that picture, it's total garbage. Like you took you messed up all the colors on it. To this day, the Times Leader still publishes the photos that are meant for. That's how shitty and backwards the website is to this fucking day. They still can't get that right. Like, delete those photos when it goes to the web. Publish the ones that are the actual photos that the photographer took all this time to take, and make it look good. And but they still don't do that to this day. But anyway, I maybe in retrospect should have said, sorry, Mom and Dad is gone. But I didn't. And I don't know why. Maybe because I was dealing with literally everything else that I just said for the past couple hours. So it really didn't occur to me. It was just like, yeah, okay, it's something that fills a space. It has an audience, I'm sure. I don't know, because they won't send me the numbers. I can't tell what's doing well and what's not doing well, because I never get those numbers. I can't, the web people are just non-existent. So Sarah, when she took over the Weekender, and this is not Sarah, the staff writer that I hired, this is the Sarah that George hired from out of the area. She didn't know anything about the area, so she hired Justin full time. And I guess it had to do something, from what I hear from sources in the paper at the time, that it was a thing that George really liked him, so he wanted to see him in the office every day. So they decided to hire him as the staff writer. So he essentially created his own version of what he thought the Weekender should be. I think he honestly thought he was doing what the Weekender should be. Like, oh, we're the alternative, so we should be doing like outrageous stories. We should be doing gossipy stuff. We should be doing outrageous stuff that offends people. We should be doing things that grab people's attention, because that's, the TMZ type stuff that pulls people in. I've always been against that kind of stuff, because that stuff is fleeting. It might get the traffic at first, but then people eventually figure out this is garbage, and they stop supporting it. And the people that do feed into it, you're attracting negativity. You're attracting negative people saying negative things, and you're just breeding negativity. And I just feel like that's the wrong direction. But that's the direction that they took the Weekender while I was launching an EPA scene. So the content became offensive to be offensive, and I'm not an easily offended guy. I'm really not. I love super offensive stand-up comedy and things like that. I'm not offended by practically anything. But it was stuff that was like, oh, wow, I never would have got away with this when I was there. But for some reason, he's getting away with it. So it was adding to that resentment of like, I got fired for doing the very best work that I could possibly have humanly done. This guy gets away with printing this garbage, and they're just pumping it out there like they think it's the greatest thing on earth. And right away, the reason that I heard so much about it was my readers, people telling me, oh, wow, what you're doing is light years ahead of what they're doing. I can't believe what they're publishing. Because I had followed them on social media. I blocked everybody that, not, people that I worked with that I loved, but all of the toxic people that I dealt with over those last couple of years at the TL. I blocked all those people on social media because I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to deal with them. And I didn't want to know what the other guys were up to, because I didn't want it to taint my content either. I didn't want it to influence what I was doing at all. But it just became so loud that you couldn't ignore it. And that's when they published the infamous article where Justin wrote a story that was essentially stolen valor. He wrote a story where he said that he went to a bar and he was wearing an army jacket, and a guy who was, drinking at the time was like, oh, let me buy you a beer, veteran, like fellow vet, like, thanks for serving our country. And he thought to himself, free drinks? Great. I'll pretend to be a veteran and keep getting those free drinks. And that story went viral for absolutely the reasons they did not want it to go viral. It made Fox News. It made a whole bunch of major news sources. It went overseas. I don't know if it was the Daily Mail, but it was like a site like that picked it up. Like, it was in the UK. Like, everybody was talking about the Weekender for the wrong reasons. And my perspective was, not only was I angry about it being this shitty, terrible article about this terrible thing that he was bragging about, but that it got through editorial, that they published it. They replaced me with the woman who let that go, who said, yeah, you know what? That's a great story. Let's publish that. I'm proud to put my name on that. I thought a bunch of typos were offensive to my name.
Right.
This woman thought, sure, stolen valor? That's funny. That's a great story.
Let her
Our
rip.
readers definitely hear that. Like, at no point did she have the foresight to go, holy shit, this is a bad idea.
Right.
At no point. Like, she not only was not offended to it, but approved it. Or which I feel is the actual story, and maybe she'll read this and correct me. I don't think she ever read it. I don't think anyone ever read it. I think everything was on autopilot because George was out of the office all the time. I'm sure she was too. I'm sure they were checked out having drinks during happy hour while everybody else was working their asses off. I sincerely doubt anybody in their right mind would have read that and go, yeah, sure, that's fit for publication.
Well, from what I understand, she also was involved in happy hours and not, on the side of the bar that we would be on drinking beer, but the person serving them. That was her. That was her resume.
That was her background.
Her experience to be qualified for the editor job of the Weekender was a bartender at like a Fridays. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with. No. Hey, I know a lot of bartenders. I'm not this. That's not a knock on them because guess what? Like, I think that they make a lot more money than idiot people go to college for.
Make more money than I do.
yeah, dude. I mean, that's why they're bartenders.
Yep.
And people say, "Oh, well, you're a bartender in your 40s." Well, guess what? They're making more money in their 40s than you are in your 40s. Yeah. Working a full-time job.
Absolutely.
So what I'm saying is not a knock on that, but when you're saying, "Hey, we want you to come work as the Weekender or as an editor for the Weekender or any product for that matter," what are your credentials? And you say, I was a bartender. And you're like, all right, that works. Like, that's why people go to school. That's why people get degrees.
Exactly. So that's why I was in so much debt.
So they can say, hey, so I've done this job for so many years. That's why I'm qualified for this now.
Right. And
I mean, I wouldn't expect to be qualified to be a spaceman. Like,
right.
So let's make sure. I'm not at all saying anything wrong with the bartender or anything like that. I wouldn't expect to be qualified to be a spaceman,
right?
Or spacewoman, or space person.
Yeah, I mean, bartenders are qualified to be therapists for sure.
Yes,
more so than most people with degrees, but
yes.
maybe not in this case.
Yes,
the editor of a paper to just jump into that. So even before that incident actually happened, and I think it was maybe a couple of months before, the Weekender Awards came up again, and they had a category, best blog. And so I, as petty as I wanted to be, I was like, I don't even whatever. They're doing their stupid thing every year. I know when it comes up because I was there, for how many years, but I'm not doing any of that stuff. I personally don't want to get involved in any of the award stuff or whatever. We sponsor the Steamtown Music Awards every year, which is great in itself, but Joe Caviston and Kenny Norton and all those guys handle that stuff. We just promote it. We don't have any involvement in that process. So, so the Weekender Awards came up, and I got an email one day from the Weekender. You won.
You have it.
You won best blog. And the funny thing is it says NEPA scene, and obviously does not say Rich Howells. So I don't know if they knew that it was me. I don't know if they were following me at this point. I don't know. But I was like, I'm gonna go fucking accept this because this is just pure. I did not ask for a vote. I will stand by that. I did not ask anybody to vote for me. I didn't know it was. I honestly had completely forgotten that it was going on at the time. They were just running their thing, and they happened to have this best blog thing, and I won. So I went and I saw Sarah, and I shook her hand, and was very cordial. Oh, thank you for the award or whatever. So, I only had a few seconds there between all those how chaotic those things are, and how many people are coming and accept awards, whatever. I said, can you do me a favor? I noticed that your website still lists me as the editor. I would really appreciate it if you took my name off that, because I've moved on since then and I'm doing so much better, and I really don't want to sully my reputation. So that was the only time I was kind of petty. I was like, I really don't want to sully my reputation. Could you please take my name off of that? I believe I gave it in a note, actually, because I didn't want to interrupt everything that was going on, cause a scene or whatever. I didn't know how to react. But I gave him a note. The next day, my name had disappeared from the website, so they got the message.
It's good because it's interesting that they took your credentials away off your email and the social media, but they didn't care to take your name.
But they forgot about the website because their website sucks. It's always sucked. It continues to suck to this day, even though it doesn't exist anymore. There's still theweekender.com, and it's still it's a bunch of AP stories now. It's not. I checked it the other day out of curiosity, and then I won it the next year.
Back-to-back champion.
So I went and accepted it again, which they had to begrudgingly give me after this terrible incident, just Ann Brown. And then the third year, I'm pretty sure I won again. After they had taken the votes for it, they deleted the category and never announced a winner for Best Blog in 2017. They just seemed to forgot about that. Sure. Coincidentally, they just forgot that existed. So I'm pretty sure I won that year, and they were probably sick of me smugly going in and taking this thing off of them. So they were like, "Okay, yeah,
Well, at that point, it's just funny because it's like
it is. It's a stereotype.
The canceled editor,
comes
in. Except it's almost like an Onion story,
It is. It is. It was such a joke, and that's how I took it. I found it amusing. I didn't care at this point. It was like I had moved on. I love NEPA scene. It's my life now. That's what I've been doing for the past 6 years, which is now longer than I ever spent at Times Leader Family Papers.
So I didn't get my charger for my computer. So let's take a real quick pause, and then we'll come back and talk about NEPA scene.
Sure.
All right, 1 second. All right, we're back. Sorry. I was not expecting. Well, actually, you know what? I was expecting to go this long. But
I hope somebody's still listening.
Well, I got to say about all these things. I don't really care. I mean, for the Weekender stuff, I assume that Weekender people will listen to it. I don't imagine I would get many listeners outside of that. But even like the regular podcast with bands, I hope for the band's sake that they, or if it's a business owner, I hope they get something out of it. But at this point in my life, I'm doing it for me, and I hope to grow it to the point where people can benefit as well. But speaking about benefiting, let's talk about what you've been doing with NEPA scene, because it's been great. You said 6 or 7 years now.
It's 6 years. This will be our 7th year in September.
So yeah, so it's a completely independent NAPA scene,
Yep.
online website, entertainment.
Online only. No costly print.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing today with the site and what your plans are for the future. Because I know COVID and all that kind of shit has really affected everyone, and I'm sure it's impacted you as being an entertainment website. So
Sure.
talk about NAPA scene, what you've done, and what your plans are for the future.
So, as I had said, NEPA scene was conceived before, long before I even started at the Weekender. So it wasn't, I'm sure there's probably some people out there who are like, oh, well, you just copied the Weekender, you just stole that idea, just made it digital. And that was never the goal of NPA Scene at all. NPA Scene was my way of combining my blogging experience with my journalism experience and doing it the way I wanted to do it, that I never could do, and not to say that I didn't have any kind of freedom at Go Lackawanna or the Weekender, but it was still under watchful eyes. And, I still had bosses to answer to and everything like that. So it wasn't completely mine. And it could be taken away from me at any time, and it was. So it wasn't truly mine in that sense. NEPA scene was my way of like putting my personal mark on my work and what I wanted to put out in the world. And it was telling, sometimes I would do long form stories. And as I joked earlier, not everybody reads those because they just read headlines and they don't actually click on the articles. But for those people that do, I hope that they're rewarded with articles that are a little more in depth than they're going to find in other local media, and that it's going to be done differently, that the coverage is different. When we started the NEPAC podcast, it was originally an audio only podcast at 25/8 Studios, which was fun, but a very different form, very long form format. And my co-host was Marky Denenbaum, and Lauren Coralico also was a co-host for a while too. And so there was a lot of voices in there and a lot of like different ideas of what the show should be and stuff like that. So eventually Marky just got too busy and was like, I frankly can't do this anymore. So at that point we moved to Cole Creative, and that's when I relaunched the podcast with you as a co-host and Brittany Boop, because I always feel like a female voice is important to have. And Brittany was a friend of mine and a very fun-loving friend, so I thought she's going to add some kind of different energy to it. So we did it as a live streaming podcast where it was video and audio, that you can tune in different ways, and you could interact with us too. The previous podcast was all pre-recorded, and we just uploaded it, listened to it. This was our way of kind of interacting a little bit, and giving you, hey, you can comment, and we'll talk about your comments and stuff like that. And it was interesting to get used to different co-hosts and figuring out that too. And in retrospect, maybe I feel like maybe I should have given you a little bit more of a voice, or Brittany more of a voice, because I overwrite, and that's a downfall of mine. Is when I do an interview, I write like 2 hours worth of questions for a 1 hour interview. So a lot of times I was trying to fit in a lot, and I was hoping like, okay, I maybe wasn't leaving you enough of a window to contribute as much as I wanted to.
Well, in the same sense
Not that you didn't contribute, but that sometimes I think I maybe overtook it a little bit.
well, I mean, for me, I never thought that, because like for me, it was your show. It was NEPA scene as your baby. It was your idea. And I was kind of along for the ride, and I kind of appreciated everything that I was kind of offered in that ride. I never felt that I wasn't given a fair shot or anything like that. Like, so, I mean,
Oh, we're good. I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, it was,
that's probably just me overthinking things
yeah,
like I
yeah,
usually do.
yeah. I mean, there's been other points in my life where I've been part of things, where I'll use the word donated time because I was never paid for it.
Yeah,
Um, where I gave a big voice to, and I gave a lot of effort to that. That person to this day still has not paid me for. Um, but that's for another day.
I'm sure it'll come up again.
Another day.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And anyone who knows me understands what
Oh,
that
I know
means.
exactly what you're talking.
That's yeah. I mean, I aired that laundry with Jane on the podcast with her, and but yeah, I mean,
I got to go back on this now.
yeah, I was really hesitant to do it, but I'm like, you know what, fuck it, like it is what it is. I'm not speaking any lies. It's not like I'm
Yeah,
and at that point I tried to also hear the other side of the story because I was like maybe my thought process behind it is different from theirs,
right,
and they weren't willing to do that. So I was like, well, I guess my side is the right side. So fuck them.
right.
But back to what we're talking about, I never, yeah, I mean, NEPA scene was your thing, and I was just thankful to be part of it. I think it was a great opportunity for me to be introduced to people that I knew, as well as people that I didn't. I remember
Yeah,
I got to was introduced to Amanda Rogan for instance, just one in particular, um, and her music thing is called Sweet Nest, and I thought her album was from front to back phenomenal.
yeah,
I got to meet Alex Seeley through you, which
yes.
unfortunately we lost just recently to a battle with cancer, which is very unfortunate. Um, you know,
Alex too. He contributed so much uh, great photography to the website early on, and I've been working on this. Not that I feel that there's a time limit to these things, but I've been working in the last couple of weeks on like a tribute to Alex, and obviously I wanted to get it out. You know, he passed away a couple of weeks ago of cancer, and he was on our infamous photography podcast. I'll say
yes,
that
yes,
because there were some things that were said on that show that I guess riled some people or whatever. Um, Never meant to be. I didn't know about it till after the fact, honestly. But Alex was a great contributor to that show. And quick, funny story. While he was parked outside for the podcast, his car got smashed into. Like somebody just drove right into his car and just fucked up his car. Beyond belief.
Jesus,
While he was doing the show, and after the show, to tell you what kind of guy Alex is, he was like, "Oh yeah, my car got smashed, so maybe somebody give me a ride." I would have been freaking the fuck out. I would have been like, "Holy
what the
fuck, my
fuck?
car's fucked.
Holy fuck,
Fuck you, fuck everything."
scumbag!
Yeah, I would have been freaking the fuck out. He was cool as a cucumber and was just like, "Yeah, yeah, whatever, sure, shit
That's
happens."
funny.
Like that's just the kind of guy he was. But yeah, great dude, great dude. Yeah, I'm glad you got you felt that you got stuff out of it because I always felt you were an important contributor to the show. And you helped us get our sponsors, which was important to me because and I'll put this out there, like I've barely ever scraped together a living on Casey because I'm not a salesman. I'm not good at asking people for things. You with your ad background, you with your sales background were able to secure me some money when I absolutely needed it, and you didn't take a dime for it. I will always be forever grateful for
No, man. I don't want to say this as like that's the kind of guy I am, um, because it's not how I operate. And it goes back to my relationship with the business I was just joking about. How I worked for free for 3 years, and that person basically stole my time
Right.
and my name and my connections and my networking. People. Um, we're very upfront with that. Like, you it was an APA scene podcast, and I was a co-host for that. I was able to, like I said, secure a sponsor, and this was your full time gig, and I knew that I had a full time job. Um, the money for me was not like I knew it would go, a long way for you, and again, I was just happy to be part of it. I really was. I got a lot out of it. I think it helped me to do what I am doing now. I mean, I started with you in March of 2017. I
Yeah.
launched a radio show in August of 2017. So I think a lot of what I learned from doing that and experienced that with you helped me do that too. So, I mean, I got a lot out of it. I mean, I was definitely, money was not, exchanged, but that's not what I wanted. I mean, I that's not what I wanted out of it. I'm
I
thankful
agree.
that you were able to kind of benefit from that. And yeah.
Well, and that's the thing I want to stress with people. Much like the radio hosts told Matt Morgus, like I wouldn't recommend uh, running this type of independent online publication to get rich. It's never going to happen, and that was never my intent. I've always kind of lived very frugally. You know, the most that I spend money on is, maybe a couple of craft beers and comic books, some action figures here and there, but I don't live very excessively. And that's the only way that I've been able to do an EPA scene. If my wife wasn't as supportive as she was, I never would be able to do this full time.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Just, and I'm not trying to cut you off, but I feel like
No,
it's very important to kind of acknowledge that, because not everyone would be able to do what you do without the support system that you have.
no,
Which is your wife. So
this
Tanya,
this
shout
was
out Tanya.
between Tanya. Tanya, understood what I wanted to do and understood that I wouldn't have been happy doing something else. Like, yeah, maybe I'd make more money being a registered jockey somewhere, but that I would hate my life. That I would just be so miserable, and kind of accepted that, like, okay, I'll support you in this, and anytime we do anything, whether it's a fundraiser or when we sell t-shirts, she's the one helping me bag the t-shirts and put the stamp on them and send them out to people, and she's doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that people don't see, and that I'll be forever grateful for. But and a lot of friends of mine, Jason Reedmiller is a friend of mine that goes back to the Go Lackawanna days. We met at one of the Warp Tours. He was assigned, I don't know if he was assigned by Lello or if he was assigned by the Times leader, but he was freelancing at the time and he was covering the Warp Tour at the same time. We essentially took it like we probably could have used the Weekender stuff, but we were like, let's have fun for one day. Let's leave the courtrooms and the fires and the police shit behind and like have fun at Warp Tour for the day. So like we like hung out with Andrew WK and crazy people like that and had a good time with some of the Weekender people like Matt Morgus, Mike Lello, and all those guys. And me and Chris Hughes were up there and we met Jason Reedmiller and we're like, okay, he has the same sense of humor we do. We hit it off really well. So he started freelancing for Go Lackawanna. which led into when I took over the Weekender. I used him as a freelancer for a lot of our concert photography, and that led into what he's been doing with us ever since. He's always been one of our main photographers, and we've worked with a lot of other people over the years. Keith Perks, Scott Kucharski is one of our current photographers and stuff. And the NEPA scene has always been kind of a volunteer operation. Whenever people can help out, they help out and contribute. Because I'm the guy who I edit everything. I post all the content. Every social media post is me, essentially, except for maybe a couple of things on Instagram for the most part. But everything that you see is me having to do all of these things, which is, skills that I took from the 4 years that I spent at Go Like One Weekender. So I can't say that none of that stuff paid off or that none of that experience made a difference. I know that maybe this is one of the more negative episodes of this particular series, but I can't say that I didn't learn a lot from that. My problem is that most of my memories of that are kind of tainted from that. Much like the girlfriend analogy keep going back to. Like, you want to remember the good times, but they kind of get sullied when she cheats on you and she tells you all these lies, and you look back on it and you're like, oh my God, I was so manipulated and so hurt in so many ways. It's kind of the same sort of feeling. So it taints a lot of the good memories that I have of the Weekender. But I had to throw all that stuff out years ago, like the free T-shirts and the stickers and all that kind of crap I had laying around. I'm like, I got to get rid of all this stuff and pretend this doesn't exist anymore. But now that I'm far removed from that and, way over the type of animosity or whatever, I'm more or less kind of relating this story to you, not only because you asked, but as kind of here's what you might get into in modern journalism these days. They will chew you up and spit you out. And I've known a lot of people since then that have gotten chewed up and spit out by the system. And there's 2 major newspaper companies in the area, and I'm sorry, they're both guilty of it. They both do it, and they do it to some really good people who work really hard and are really passionate, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day. So that's why I feel like stuff like NEPA Scene is the future of arts and entertainment journalism in the area. Much like the Popco project. I think that's the future. Because the other guys aren't going to do the Popco project. I'm sorry. They're just not, the Scranton Times is not going to do that. The Times Leader is not going to do that because they have other things to deal with. They have other things to worry about. And arts and entertainment is just not a priority for them anymore. And that's clear by the Weekender going away, the Electric City going away. They can launch all their other little, online only websites that are a big ripoff of other things that exist that they want. They can do that. They can launch all their, access, whatever, to anybody that they want. At the end, you're not fooling anybody. It's just a way to recycle the same content that you're putting out through other people. I'm not, I think, so a lot of people probably listen to this and be like, oh God, this guy is bitter. But I'm not bitter about it. It's just, that's the reality of it. And I don't think enough people understand the reality of it. I think that's kind of what you're doing, with the series in a lot of ways too. It's just, here's the reality. Like, there's some, the people who got out early enough, they had great times. But there were also buyouts back in the day. The Times Leader used to be owned by Disney, of all companies, back in the day. So, they've been through, Knight Ridder is another name that comes up. There's so many different names and hedge funds and all kinds of things that have buyouts and whatever that have happened over the years. So there's stories from all of those that I'm sure and a lot of them will probably never be told because a lot of people don't seem to care about the nitty gritty of it. But I think it's important because kids are going to school for this stuff right now. They want to learn about this stuff. My advice is to do your own thing. Part of the reason that I got hired at the Times Leader Scranton edition originally, before it became Go Lackawanna, was they were like, "Oh, you've blogged before?" They never read any of my blogs because if they did, they never would have hired me. But they were like, "Oh, you know that blogging exists. You know that digital content exists." That was enough for them. They were like, "Oh, cool. All right, that's you've freelanced. That helps. You've written some real articles for an actual print paper, but you also have this experience as well." And they saw that as a positive thing. So you might get lucky and you might get into one of these types of things. But I also want to stress too that our area is very unique in the sense that I'm doing a site that it is still in this two paper area, which is very rare, to the point where large media sources, big media sources, have done stories about that. That we're such an abnormality for the country, because most places don't even have a paper, and if you have a paper, there's one paper. The fact that Northeast PA has two papers still, and maybe they're barely hanging on by a thread, but they're still there, and they're still against each other, and they're still trying to compete. It's been interesting to have to find our own place as NEPA scene and establish our own name and do our own thing. And neither of the companies really like me all that much. They don't like that I exist. The Times Leader, when George and Sarah were still employed at the Times Leader, they did copy some of my content. Sarah blatantly plagiarized one of my stories. They stole photos that my photographers took for NEPA scene. They published them uncredited to those photographers, uncredited to NEPA scene. And they did these things to poke at me and to further give me that finger and say, "Fuck you. We don't like that you exist. And look, we can do this because we know that it's going to cost you money to go after us. You hire a lawyer or somebody like that, that's going to cost you money you can't afford. So we can do whatever we want." And they poked and poked and poked, but I ignored all that, and eventually they went away. George ended up moving to another area and got hired another paper after the damage was done. Sarah, I don't know what happened to her, but the Weekender never recovered after that. After I was gone and after they were gone, they went through several different people after that. They did hire one guy who I think did a great job as the editor, but it was too little too late. They had already lost, once they did the Stolen Valor article, that was the end of the Weekender forever. And they tried to recover from that by hiring maybe something. I don't know if that was the mindset or whatever. They hired somebody who was passionate, like I was, about the NEPA scene, was passionate, put out the same type of stories, was really writing these great articles and whatever. But I don't know if anybody ever read them. I don't know if they ever found the audience because the audience was gone at that point. Their social media was abysmal. There was barely any of our updates ever. And after that, they pushed him out the same way they did me. They fired him one day, even though he had family obligations and things like that he had to deal with. And I feel bad for him that he went through that because he got the same raw deal I did.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of faded away slowly but surely. They would force people who were already doing stories at the Times Leader to contribute to the Weekender, to run, like the Weekender essentially ran without an editor for a while. There was no credited editor whatsoever. It was like the guy who's doing sports was doing album reviews and things like that. And, I personally never really, I didn't really follow it. It was just kind of what I heard from other people. And it just kind of died off to the point where I checked before our interview. Their last update on Facebook was almost a year ago. Was in March of last year.
Yeah.
So they stopped printing. They stopped updating their social media. And to me, it's kind of like I'm sure you kind of feel the same way. It's like uh, it's bittersweet. Like you miss it because you remember the good times, but you're also like, yeah, you guys had this coming. This is a long time coming.
Well, I'm happy it happened now because I mean I wanted initially when I left, and again I left on my own accord. So like I should have had no animosity whatsoever, but I did because again I felt like it was a girl who did me wrong, and I loved her, but I also hated her. But I didn't want anything bad to happen because there were still people like you and Sarah and all those people there. And once you were all gone, I'm like, I want that fucking thing to burn. I want it to go away. I don't want to have to think about it anymore. I don't want to. I don't. I know what it was.
Yeah.
I know what it could be, and I just don't want to see it anymore.
Yeah.
And we have that now. It's gone. It's over.
Right. And you know what? It sucks because I feel like I've come a long way since then. I've done a lot of work that I'm really proud of, and we were doing the open mic up until obviously the pandemic, stopped that from happening. But we do that twice a year, and it was a big we did it kind of as an open mic and a talent contest. So we kind of brought in a bigger audience from that stuff. We did a lot of, more in-depth content. We did a lot of, song premieres and album, premieres and video premieres and things like that, which is a very common thing in modern music journalism. And nobody's doing it here for whatever reason. So finally, that's kind of caught up, and we're always at least 5 years behind the times in Northeast PA. So things have finally caught up, and we're doing that stuff now. I see you're doing that with the podcast too, which is great. That's the kind of stuff that these people deserve that are doing this stuff now, and that's kind of why I continue to do what I do, because there's so many great artists in the area, and I don't feel like they have ever gotten enough credit, even in the heyday of the Weekender and everything else. There's just too many of them doing too much great stuff.
I'm glad you said that. What is it? Because there's too many of them.
There is. There will always be.
And that sounds terrible to say. Oh, there's too many. Because no, it's not. It's not a bad thing. It's and that's one thing. That's why I started the radio show, which was all natives, because there was so many artists that were not being featured.
Mm-hmm.
That radio show was not anything new. There was a show before that was around for many, many years. But that show continued to just play the oldies.
Yeah.
It was that's what it was. And that's fine. But that's a story for another day.
Yeah. But and I think it speaks to, it's important to do the stuff that's personal to you, that's satisfying for you, because you have a creative itch that you want to scratch, that you want to, okay, I love this particular artist, and I want to make sure that they get the royal treatment. They get a great article, they get a great podcast, they get some kind of great coverage of their particular art because it speaks to me personally. But you also have to branch out and cover the stuff that you might not personally like, but you have to understand that the audience out there likes it. I'm a metalhead. I grew up on metal and punk music. That's what spoke to me. So that's what I love to write about. But I also regularly cover, like rap and hip hop and all kinds of other genres that I don't particularly listen to on a regular basis, but I respect what they do. I listen to them and I hear their stories, and I'm like, yeah, you are just as passionate as the guy putting out that stuff. And you deserve a voice too. You deserve the coverage. and you're just not going to get it from the newspapers because they just have given up on that. And whether that's because of ignorance or that's because of financial reasons, that's not for me to say. But they just aren't doing it anymore, so somebody has to step up and do it. And I've seen other sites in the area do it too, which is great. I don't mind competition, unlike the other guys, unlike the newspapers who, like it's weird. I've been interviewed in the Scranton Times several times. Maybe one or two of those times have actually made print because they don't know how they feel about me. Some people there, some editors are like, yeah, sure, whatever. It's some kid with a blog who gives a shit. Fucking 37. But yeah, it's somebody with a blog who gives a shit. Other people are like, they're strict competition and they're here to destroy us as a media company, and we must fight them and we must crush them under our boot. Absolutely never give them the time of day. Make sure that no one ever knows that they exist. Because I know for a fact they hated Go Lackawanna existing, even though we were this little fucking weekend paper that could never really truly compete on that level because they were putting on a daily paper in a building full of people. In the same way, I'm doing this from my house. This is my living room. My $200 computer upstairs is what everything an EPA scene is on, and a crappy 2 terabyte jump drive is all of NEPA scene. That's it. That's our whole big operation. I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of resources. I just do it because I love it. And that's all it's ever going to be. But for some reason, there are some people in local media who can't stand that I exist, and they want to see me crushed, and they want to see me gone.
Well, if they were
competition,
if they were smart, and I don't even know if you would go for this, but if they were smart, they would offer a buyout, or not a buyout, but a purchase.
And that's I've a few people have said that before, and I've always thought, what would I ever say to that? And my response is, you know what? I'll never have to know because it'll never happen. That's the sad thing.
Well, I mean, I think what you say is like, yeah, you can buy the product, and you just get lawyers involved and say, okay, but you get
Sure.
I'm on staff.
Yeah.
I'm the one who makes the calls, and
yeah.
if you want to continue to keep the audience, you will continue to keep me on board, and life is good. But yeah, it's funny you say that. People who say, "Oh, he's not an issue," and then there's people who are like, "Oh, yes, he's a thorn in our side." And it's like, well, guess what? And you mentioned competition. It's I think competition is good, and it keeps you on your toes. It makes you better every day.
Yeah.
And it just makes you think about things differently.
Absolutely. There will always be, from working in a team at the Weekender, everybody always brought a different perspective. As much as I got along with Sarah, she would come in with a completely different perspective than I had. Same with Amanda, same with you, same with Paul, same with everybody. Everybody had a different idea, different perspective, and that's all valid and important. And, if I had more resources, I would absolutely be able to do more. But I've just kind of worked with what I have and done the best that I can do. And if that's not good enough, please start your own site, start your own podcast, start your own whatever, and see how difficult it truly is. See how local media treats you. See how other people treat you. There are even other blogs in the area who are not fans of what I do and aren't supportive of what I do. And to them, I always say, you're welcome to come to me because I will always support you. I support independent media. When you launched Popco Project, I couldn't wait to be first in line to do an interview with you to talk about it, because more people need to be doing this stuff, because it's about the mission. And the mission is to support the artists, support arts and entertainment in the area, to keep those things alive. Because when I first launched it, there was definitely a few comments here and there that were like, NEPA scene? What NEPA scene? Doesn't exist. There's no scene. There's no music scene. There's no art scene. That doesn't exist around here. That's bullshit. And as the months went on, those comments went away. And as the years have gone on, I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that in years. I haven't heard people say that, because there's no denying, when you publish articles day after day after day, podcasts week after week after week, saying, here's all these people doing all this great stuff, you can't tell me that there's not a scene in the area. And it's maybe it's not the scene you want, but you can create it at any time. You can contribute at any time. And I'm proof of that. You can do what you want to do around here, because frankly, nobody else is going to do it.
That's true. And I want to thank you for always being supportive of me, what I do. And I don't think the Popco project is so much a competitor, as much as it is an attribute or just an extension of what you're doing. I mean, you've always been a leader in what we're doing here in NEPA, and yeah, I mean, it's. I think we all have to work together to an extent, you know.
And let me say, a reluctant leader at that. I'm the kind of guy who, when I first got into music, I go to shows by myself, and I still do to this day. I've never had a lot of friends, and friends that I have had are like really close friends. Most of my really good close friends have moved away. They don't live in NEPA. A lot of people move out of this area. So to this day, I go to a lot of stuff by myself, but I go to it for the love of the arts. I go to actually see the show. I don't go to get fucking blasted at the bar. I go to the bar because I want to see the band play. You know, that's the kind of thing that I'm into. And I regret that I didn't get into it sooner. You know, like when I was a teenager and I first started to drive, and I, first got a car when I was in college, a crappy hand-me-down that broke down all the time. I was going to shows in like Allentown and Philadelphia and whatever else, not realizing that like there's an incredible scene right here, and that I just never paid attention to. But then when I started to pick up things like The Weekender, it was like, oh, wow, cool. This stuff is happening here. There are things here. In college, I happened to meet a band, Felix Sarko, that was very influential in my life. And it was like, wow, they're a local band doing this here. And this is something that I would have paid a ridiculous ticket price in Philly to see. And they're right here for $5 at the door at, your local bar. What have I been missing? And then the more that I looked into it, it's like, wow, there is a lot of really cool stuff happening here. So I just hope that the people growing up now that don't have a weekender to tell them where to go, that maybe at some point an EPA scene is turned on to those types of things. I hope that they've found an article was like, wow, oh, cool. I didn't know that there was metal here. I didn't know there was punk here. I didn't know there was hip hop here. I didn't know that there was, folk music here. Whatever the case may be, we have every genre in this area, and it's all good. It's all good. There's very few that I could say like, yeah, okay, that's not the best, but they're getting better. A lot of it is like professional quality, great stuff. There's so many great recording studios here. There's so many talented professional people doing incredible work. And it's sad that like when we do like the big guys like Menzingers, Tiger's Jaw, Title Fight, all those guys or whatever, they're nationally known. They're more known out there than they are here. If I were to walk down this street right now in West Scranton and ask somebody, "Hey, you ever listen to Menzingers? You ever listen to Tiger Jaw?" They go, "Who the fuck is that?"
Yeah, you're right.
What are you talking about? I've never heard of that. You know, because they only listen to whatever's on mainstream radio or whatever. They've never given it a shot. But somebody in, I get to this day, like, we interviewed Brianna and Tiger Jaw.
Mm-hmm.
I still get comment, YouTube will tell me every time I get a comment on stuff. And it's 99% of the time, it's people from around the country. It's never somebody from Scranton.
Yeah, let's call out Brianna. Brianna, I've emailed you and Ben to try and talk about your new record. I know Rich.
Oh, please. Yes.
And I know Rich has been able to get through. Great article. I know you're doing stuff this week. Hit me up. What the hell?
Come on.
I'm not a nobody. I mean, I'm a nobody, but I'm not a nobody.
You've met. We
have before. Pictures, Brianna. We have pictures together. Multiple pictures together.
Yep. Proving it.
I have them. I will send them to you. Actually, so she's like, oh yeah, just this is when we interviewed her for the NPA Scene podcast.
Yeah.
I said, hey, it was, I think my 2nd year anniversary was coming up for the Alt Native show.
Yeah.
She's like, oh yeah. I said, it'd be cool to get or maybe it was a year. I forget. A year or 2 years. I said, it'd be great to have like a cool, like, annual guest. She's like, oh yeah, reach out to me directly at the band email, blah, blah, blah. I did that, and she did not respond. And then I tried to get her for the All Natives After Hours podcast for the show at the arena last summer. Yeah. And she did not get back to me. And then I saw her at the show at the arena.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, yeah, I remember you. What's going on? I said, yeah, I tried to reach out to you. I know you're busy. Like, don't, I mean, like, I'm not trying to, like, be an asshole here.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, my God, no, I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. Just, reach out to us. So I reached out again later on. Like, I think, I don't know if it was, like, the tail end of Alt Natives After Hours or if it was the launch of this. I included pictures. I'm like, this is me and you here. This is me and you there. But I guess they got a new publicist, which, yeah, whatever. It's all good.
Yeah. They're on a new label now.
Yeah, I'm a nobody. I get it. I'm not mad about it. It's just funny to think about.
Yeah, it's, but you got to keep trying because when I had to start the site, I was essentially starting from scratch. Like all that cred of like, oh, I'm the editor of The Weekender, which has X amount of readers and publishes X amount of papers. Overnight, I went from that to I run this website that nobody knows about again. I have to start all over again from scratch. But now, we have more social media followers than Weekender, Electric City, everybody combined.
There you go.
Combined. And that was years ago.
Yeah.
We've surpassed that number since then.
Well, that was my biggest fear doing this was like, I always felt like, okay, well, I've always had like a backing person, whether it was like my backing was The Weekender or my backing was Alt 92.1. I said, how do can I exist outside of those mediums? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I just hopefully
you've already answered that question.
I mean, yeah, I have this. I have it's a podcast. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Google Podcasts. It's on fucking Stitcher. It's on iHeartMedia. It's on this, that. But like any idiot can do that, and it's cool, right? But like, I also hope people like take it seriously.
It will continue to grow because for every couple thousand followers, I'm like, okay, we're on a new precipice now, like whatever, and then it flatlines for a little while, but then we publish one story that's a big hit and it goes back up again, And that's kind of been the pattern over the last few years. It's just, every few years you're going to put out that one piece of content that's really going to strike people, and it's going to keep going up. But you have to keep doing it, and you have to be consistent. And you've been very good about consistently putting stuff out. People get discouraged way too quickly. I think in this day and age, they want instant gratification, and they feel like, okay, I've done 25 episodes. That should be more than enough. I should have 10,000 followers by now. I don't. Okay, I quit, and they move on to something else.
Yeah,
they keep relaunching and relaunching and really trying new ideas over and over and over again. It's not the way to do it. Stick with what you're doing, what you're passionate about. People are eventually going to discover that. They're going to see you, and they're going to see you're a genuine person. And that's really, like, from a marketing perspective, and not that I've ever been clever with that kind of thing, but that's what people want in this day and age. They want genuine sincerity. And you have that already. So you're already 10 steps ahead of whatever Times Leader, Scranton Times, whoever is putting out, because they don't have that. They just don't. They can hire some of the best people they want. Their name doesn't have that pull anymore. Just like if they were to relaunch The Weekender tomorrow, you're just going to keep carrying that baggage along with you. And no matter how many times that you put a new face behind it, a new editor, a new whatever behind it, you're still carrying that baggage. You're still, aren't you the Stolen Valor people? They're just never going to get over that. That's why they had to kill it. It's sad, but that's the reality.
It's a wild world, man. But I'm glad you're part of it. I'm glad you're sticking with it. It takes a lot of balls. It takes a lot of I'm sure sleepless nights, doing what you do, just, trying to, provide great content and a great platform and all that kind of stuff. And, I'm not saying that I'm trying to do what you do, because you're much more involved than I am, as far as, articles and stories and kind of encompassing a lot. And I'm just kind of trying to do an audio / video kind of component to that. But I think like you said, I think, people like us, and hopefully we're the future of the media here in EPA.
I think so. I think so. And you just have to stick with it. So, I'm happy to be a part of this. I appreciate you reaching out to me and making me a part of this. And maybe next time we talk down the road at some point, it won't be with that bag. But I am glad to be a part of the series, because people who have been listening to this series have probably been getting a lot of the cheery end of it.
Yeah. And
they maybe haven't been hearing the other part of it, the other really difficult part of it that sucks. Yeah. I wouldn't, if I had to do it again, I obviously would have still worked there. I've been chasing that steady paycheck ever since, but it's been the what I got out of it was worth it in the long run, because it prepared me for what I'm doing now. Because if I had never gotten that job and I had never done the last those 4 years, any PA scene would have been very different.
Right.
And I don't know if it would have been as good as it is, because I wouldn't have had that professional background.
No, and you're doing a great job. And I mean, keep pushing forward. It's unfortunate what happened to the Weekender. If I had my way, I'd still be the GM there, and we'd still be rocking and rolling. And yeah. I mean, that's what I wanted to. I mean, I we grew up in a time where our parents, they got the gold watches and were on the way to retirement from their jobs.
Yeah.
Or
that's what I hoped for.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I wanted too. I mean, that was I was an intern. I was like, I want to be the GM one day. And that's what I strive for. And I was like, I got there. I did that.
Yeah.
And it was not what I expected it to be. So and the world is not like that anymore. It's you don't get the job out of college or the job out of high school and work there for 40 years and retire.
Yep.
That life is not, what we're living in
Right.
this day and age. So we just got to keep our heads down, keep doing great jobs and providing people with what they want. And I think by doing that, we will get to where we need to be.
For sure.
So I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you being honest with the conversation and telling the story about the good, bad, and the ugly, because that's what I wanted these Weekender files to be. I wanted them to talk about all of those things. And you had mentioned like a lot of them have been good, but there are stories that are good, bad, and ugly. And unfortunately for you, you experienced the whole gamut. So thanks for sharing them. I'm happy that I was along for the ride, and I think that's why I make a good host for these, is because like I knew what it was when it was great, and as a naive intern even,
Right.
and then I knew what it was to be on top and being like, wow, this is not what I thought it would be at all, because it was just a different time frame.
Right.
But it is what it is, and it makes us who we are. And it could always be worse, right?
Certainly
So,
can.
so
Yeah.
Rich,
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a fun trip down memory lane.
yeah, thank you. So thank you for doing what you do for with the NAPA scene and for our area.
Oh, thanks.
Keep pushing through, and hopefully I'll see you at a show sooner than later.
I hope so. I'm really hoping for summer.
Yeah, hopefully. So, dude, thanks again. I appreciate your time, and
Thanks.
I'll see you soon.
All right.
All right, see you.
Bye.